Hi guys! Tonight we ease into the cold edges of the Rocky Mountains where you feel snowflakes land on your cheeks before you even realise the day is ending. You stand there in the hush of early winter, the sky bruised purple, and the horizon already dissolving behind curtains of powdery white. The air nips at your fingers the way a playful dog might nip at boots, only this dog has sharper teeth, and you probably will not survive this if you keep underestimating the weather. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you want to be part of this cozy little community, drop your location and local time in the comments so we can see who else is settling in under the same stars. Now dim the lights, let your shoulders return to their natural weight, and let the trail pull you forward without hurry. You take the first uncertain steps toward the mountains, breath puffing like tiny steam engines in front of you. Snow crunches under your boots, steady and rhythmic, almost like someone is quietly applauding your progress. It sounds encouraging, but the sky says something different. The sky warns that the season is shifting faster than you expected. This is the Rockies in the 19th century, a place where a single cold snap could turn a cheerful wagon party into a frantic scramble for shelter. A mainstream fact that every frontier guide repeated was that the Rockies created their own weather systems, producing storms out of blue sky within minutes. You watch that lesson unfold right now as the last rays fade and the cold takes over as if flicking a switch. A curious little detail that few people talk about slips into your awareness. You notice how some pioneers would lift a handful of snow and rub it on their cheeks to gauge the density of the storm. The softer the flakes, the more likely the weather would worsen. It sounds counterintuitive, but the softness of the flakes means the cloud above is full of moisture that could fall quickly and heavily. You try it now, feeling the fragile crystals crumble. They dissolve instantly, leaving a dampness that warns you to pick up your pace. Historians still argue whether the earliest wagon parties fully understood just how dangerous these early storms were. Some scholars insist the warnings were obvious and simply ignored. Others say the knowledge came later, built from tragedy after tragedy, each group passing down lessons learned painfully the hard way. You feel caught between those two arguments, because right now the storm does not look threatening enough to justify the rising knot of worry in your stomach, and yet there is just enough tension in the air to push you onward. Your breath grows sharper, more disciplined. The cold has a way of making every movement deliberate. You check the tightening straps of your pack, feeling the leather stiffen. The wind hums a low tone that vibrates across the open plain, a sound that feels older than human footsteps. You pull your coat closer, but even the thick wool lets a sliver of chill sneak through, like a mischievous prank that will not stop. That is the thing about frontier cold. It behaves like a living creature, one that knows where your weak spots are. You follow a faint trail marked by earlier travellers, but winter has already begun nibbling at the edges, blurring wagon ruts, until they look like stray shadows in the snow. The Rocky Mountains rise ahead like massive ink strokes drawn across the sky. The closer you get, the more the clouds cling to their peaks like smoke from an invisible fire. Snow gathers on the path, swirling in little spirals that seem to follow you. At times, they leap past you in playful bursts as if the wind is trying to race you to shelter. A pine forest appears to your right, the trees swaying gently. The scent of sap drifts into your nose, earthy and calm. You imagine pioneers breathing this same aroma during their journeys, finding comfort in its steady presence. The forest feels like a silent witness to all the people who trudge through here, some making it, some not. You walk closer, letting the branches shield you from the wind. The needles rustle softly, making a sound like someone whispering encouragement just behind your shoulder. Your fingers brush the bark of a pine trunk. It feels rough but warm compared to the air. You imagine ancient travellers leaning on similar trees, catching their breath, pressing their cheek against the bark to borrow a little warmth. This touch can tether you to the moment, reminding you that even in the coldest places, small comforts linger. You push deeper into the forest as the sky dims further. The snow begins to thicken, flakes sticking to your eyelashes like tiny feathers. You blink slowly, letting each flake melt. Your footsteps become heavier, packed with snow that clings to your boots. You wonder how the early settlers handled this sensation every single night for months. They could not just shake off the cold and go inside to warm up by a radiator. What they had instead were endless decisions. Keep walking or stop. Make camp or push on. Search for a sheltered ridge or settle for an exposed patch of ground. A whisper of wind curls around your ears, reminding you that night is closing in fast. You feel the temperature drop another degree, almost as if the world is exhaling. This is the moment when pioneers would start scanning for even the smallest rise in land that could block the wind. A mere foot of dirt between them and the storm could make the difference between sleep and danger. You try to picture yourself in their position, weighing every instinct with the ticking urgency of the cold. Around you, the forest darkens. Faint shadows flicker between the trunks, not from anything alive, but from the wind bending branches just enough to produce little ghost-like movements. You keep walking, breathing steadily. You feel your heartbeat slow, matching the rhythm of your steps, grounding you against the splintering cold. This is how the story begins for you on this long winter journey. The cold grows deeper, the snow thickens, and the path ahead becomes uncertain. Yet there is something strangely soothing about it all, something steady and simple in the way your boots keep finding the ground. You adjust your pack again, tilt your chin up toward the mountains, and walk deeper into the gathering snow, searching for a place to rest as the storm builds its strength around you. You step out of the sheltering trees as the storm settles into its own rhythm, the way a drummer warms up before a show. The sky has gone from bruised purple to a dense, oppressive grey that hangs low enough to make you duck without realising it. This is your first night on the trail with true winter settling in, and you can feel the difference instantly. The air tastes metallic, almost like you have a spoon pressed against your tongue. The wind flicks stray strands of hair across your face, teasing you with a promise of colder gusts to come. You take a deep breath and force yourself to move forward because the light is fading and the temperature is dropping with every heartbeat. The ground beneath your boots is not snow alone. It is a patchwork of frozen earth's slick ice and hidden depressions where earlier travellers stepped and left behind shallow footprints that are now stiff with frost. You crouch for a moment and place a hand on the surface, testing it the way pioneers often did before lying down for the night. A mainstream historical fact from countless trail diaries reveals that pioneers tapped the ground to check whether frost had formed beneath the top layer. If the ground rang like ceramic, it was too frozen to sleep on without extra bedding. You hear that faint hollow tap now, a sound that echoes slightly through your fingertips. Not ideal, but not the worst either. Your breath drifts upward in a slow, smoky ribbon as you stand again. The forest edge behind you creaks softly, the trunks shifting as if whispering gossip about your stubbornness. Ahead, the open plain shimmers with thin layers of hoarfrost that crunch under your steps. Every sound feels magnified in the cold. Your pack creaks, snowflakes tick against your coat, fabric stiffens. Even your own joints make soft noises. You imagine the early travellers listening to their gear the same way, reading each creak like a message. You shift your weight and look around for a suitable place to settle in for the night. The storm is thickening, and you know the trick is to bed down before the cold digs too deep into your bones. Your gloved fingers brush the snow and come up stinging slightly. The flakes here feel different, heavier. A quirky little tidbit mentioned in some old homesteader letters said that pioneers sometimes tasted the snow to guess the storm's duration. They believed wetter snow meant a long snowfall, while drier flakes meant a shorter burst. You give the snow a cautious tap with your tongue, feeling it melt instantly. It is wetter than you expected. That is not great news. Historians still debate whether early travellers relied more on instinct or tradition when choosing bedding spots. Some argue that common sense guided them. Others believe pioneer families passed down lore so specific that choosing a sleeping position became almost ceremonial. You feel torn between those interpretations as you study the landscape. A small rise in the ground looks promising. It is not much, but even a slight slope can prevent melting snow from seeping into your blankets overnight. You walk toward it, hearing the soft, shuffling sigh of snow sliding beneath your feet. The wind pulses, occasionally nudging your coat gently. You brace yourself when the gusts strengthen, turning your face away so the snow does not sting your eyes. It is a strange sensation, this mix of urgency and calm. The world is quiet, and yet you feel the need to hurry. You drop your pack in the lee of the slight rise and kneel to clear a small space. Your hands move instinctively, brushing snow aside in broad strokes. The cold penetrates your gloves almost instantly, searing your palms in a clean, sharp way that is somehow more bearable than damp cold. You uncover a patch of ground that is packed but not icy, and you nod to yourself, satisfied in a small and practical way. As you work, your mind drifts to the pioneers who discovered tiny survival hacks simply because they had no other option. Some learned to knock their boots together before sleeping to shake out frost that could refreeze overnight and trap feet inside leather. You imitate the motion, now tapping your boots together with satisfying thuds. Snow falls away in little cascades. You spread out your bedroll, smoothing it flat. The fabric feels stiff with cold but familiar in your hands. You know it will not stay warm for long. You kneel and run your palm over it, brushing away stray flakes. The wind settles briefly, giving you a moment of perfectly still air. It feels like the storm has paused to give you time to prepare, almost politely. Your breath becomes part of the atmosphere, mingling with the snowy haze. You tug off one glove and let your bare fingers skim the edge of the bedroll. The cold bites you, but you accept it. Pioneers often kept one hand exposed for small tasks like this, trading comfort for practicality. You slip the glove back on with a firm tug and settle into a low squat, listening to the soft flutter of snow landing on your coat. The world around you begins to blur as evening turns into true night. No stars appear. The sky is an endless grey curtain. You hear faint cracks in distant trees as the temperature causes wood to contract. Sounds like old bones shifting in their sleep. You imagine how many travellers huddled under similar skies, aware that the Rockies offered no second chances. The sound is eerie, but also grounding. You ease yourself onto the bedroll, feeling the stiff fabric yield slightly under your weight. The cold radiates upward, seeping into your legs immediately. It is unpleasant, but you know the trick is to warm it with your own heat. You shift your hips, press your shoulders into the roll and exhale slowly. Your breath forms a halo above you before drifting away. The snow continues to fall in feather-like patterns, each flake landing with a soft whisper. Your eyelashes collect them until the weight makes you blink. You rub them away gently and close your eyes for a moment, listening to the quiet. Your pulse slows. Your body adjusts to the cold the way pioneers trained theirs to do. A soft howl carries across the plains. Too distant to worry about. Not yet. You pull your coat tighter and feel your body sink deeper into the bedding. The cold is a patient teacher. It reminds you that sleep out here is not comfort. It is strategy, preparation, a fragile partnership with the elements. You adjust your scarf, tuck your chin, and let your breathing even out. Above you, the storm settles into its steady fall. Snow whispers against your coat in a rhythmic pattern, creating a lullaby only winter knows. You let your eyes drift closed again, knowing you will not fall asleep easily, but understanding that this is where the journey truly begins. You lie there a while, letting the cold become its own kind of quiet company, until the wind changes direction and reminds you that comfort on the frontier is always temporary. A thin gust slides across your cheek sharper than before, slipping into the tiny gaps in your scarf like it has been waiting for its chance to strike. You sit up slowly, brushing snow off your coat, and feel the air wrap around you with a new intention. This is not the soft snowfall of earlier. This is the wind that steals warmth, the kind that pioneers feared more than hungry wolves or the crack of river ice. You rise to your feet, pulling your coat tight around your ribs. The plain ahead shimmers with moving snow-tiny grains skittering across the frozen ground. They blow in little lines that crisscross each other, forming patterns that shift as fast as you can blink. It almost looks alive. A mainstream historical fact that frontier guides repeated endlessly was that wind chill could drain a body's heat faster than even sub-zero temperatures. A person might survive 10 degrees below freezing, but add a strong wind and suddenly the cold behaves like water-washing warmth right off the skin. You feel that now. The wind sneaks under your collar, runs icy fingers along your spine, and forces an involuntary shiver out of you. You turn sideways to it, learning instinctively what pioneers learned on their first night outside, that facing the wind head-on is a mistake. Your coat flaps against your legs. Snow gathers in creases. You glance at your bedroll and realize it is too exposed. If you had tried sleeping here, the wind would have pulled your heat away as quickly as you made it. You sling your pack over one shoulder and start walking, but every step feels heavier. Snow presses against your shins, making a dry shushing sound. Your eyelashes collect frost again, more stubborn than last time. You blink it away as the wind whistles past your ear, a high, eerie tone that almost resembles a flute being played just slightly off-key. The Rockies can be mischievous that way. They do not just chill you, they taunt you a little. You search for shelter, scanning the landscape through a curtain of blowing snow. Your boots sink deeper now, each step falling into a patchwork of drifts. You notice something curious, an odd little tidbit mentioned in scattered journals from homesteaders. Some pioneers claimed they could predict the strength of an approaching storm by how the wind tasted. They swore that if it tasted dry and dusty, the storm would be short. If it tasted clean and sharp, cutting like winter citrus, then the storm had hours of fury left to spend. You open your mouth slightly as another gust hits. The taste is crisp, almost minty like broken ice. Definitely the long kind. Historians still debate whether these wind-tasting techniques were true survival skills or simply folklore passed among weary travellers. Some say they reflect genuine frontier wisdom. Others argue they were nothing more than desperate attempts to create a sense of control in a landscape that offered none. You fall somewhere between the two opinions as you stand there, wind pushing against your chest like a living thing. Maybe pioneers tasted the air because it made the danger easier to face. Maybe the taste did mean something. Either way, you feel the truth in your own mouth now. The wind is not slowing down. You angle toward a small cluster of shrubs that cling stubbornly to the plain. Their branches sway and jerk, snapping back into place after each gust. When you reach them, you crouch low to see how the snow drifts around them. The leeward side is calmer, a pocket of stillness carved out by the plants. Not perfect, but better than nothing. Pioneers often used much smaller windbreaks than this, relying on any barrier they could find. You kneel, testing the air. The difference is immediate. The wind no longer spears through your coat. It brushes past you instead, almost gentle. You lower your pack and begin scooping snow into a small ridge, shaping it into a crude wall. Snow is surprisingly cooperative. It sticks to itself like it knows what you need. Within minutes, you have a barrier tall enough to shelter your torso when you lie down. Your hands ache from the cold, but your breathing softens with relief. You spread your bedroll again, pressing your palm to the fabric. The cold has crept deeper into it, but at least the wind cannot strip away the heat you will make later. You adjust the roll's position a few inches at a time, angling it so the windbreak will protect your back. You settle onto your knees and brush away stray flakes. The world feels slightly more manageable within this little cocoon. The wind roars overhead a low rush like distant ocean waves. You close your eyes for a long breath, listening to it wrap around your makeshift shelter. It never stops entirely. It just shifts like a restless animal pacing around your camp. You tuck your scarf under your chin, pull your hat lower, and sink slowly onto the bedroll again. The cold rises beneath you, but you clench your teeth and let your body adjust. You exhale softly. Your breath thickens in the air and rises before dissolving into the greyness. The snow continues to fall, but you feel slightly cocooned now. The small ridge of snow you built blocks the worst of the gusts, allowing you to relax your shoulders for the first time since sundown. Your fingers flex inside your gloves. Your toes wiggle inside your boots, numb but responsive. You close your eyes again and picture pioneers doing exactly this, tucking themselves behind wagons or shrubs or snowmounds, trusting the smallest barrier to save them from the wind's hungry grip. Far off, the sound of shifting snow echoes across the plain, a deep, distant sliding that reminds you just how powerful the storm is. The wind pauses for a moment, long enough that the silence becomes its own sound. Then it rushes again, colder and stronger, but still deflected by your small shelter. You sink deeper into the bedding, grateful for the small victory. You pull your coat tighter and let the rhythmic rush of wind become something steady rather than frightening. It sounds like nature breathing. You let your own breath fall into sync with it, slow and even. The cold does not care about you, but it also does not hate you. It is simply what it is, and you are simply someone trying to rest in the middle of it. Your body softens a little, and you let your eyes stay closed this time, trusting the shelter you built, trusting the rhythm of the storm, trusting yourself. You lie there, listening to the wind batter your little snow ridge until hunger cold and the lingering nervousness of the storm finally convince you to get up again. You brush the accumulating flakes from your coat and sit cross-legged beside your half-packed belongings, watching your breath drift upward in slow, lazy spirals. The night deepens and the sky thickens into something that feels almost solid. You realize you need fire, not just warmth, but the soft companionship of flickering embers, the kind every pioneer trusted to get them through long winter nights. You turn toward a fallen branch half buried in the snow. Its bark is rough beneath the frost, and you can feel the strength of the wood through your gloves. You gather a few more sticks, then scrape away a patch of snow to reveal cold brown earth. Your fingers work stiffly, but you coax a spark from your tinder, and soon a tiny flame curls upward as if waking from its own nap. It grows slowly, licking at the wood with eager little sounds that crackle in the silence. You settle yourself close to it, letting the warmth reach your fingers first, then your cheeks. Flames always seem to know exactly how much comfort to offer. Not too fast, not too slow. This was something seasoned trail travellers noted in their journals, that a fire built near the ground and shielded on one side by a log or rock could keep a sleeper warm far longer than a large unprotected blaze. You test that wisdom now, pulling a small fallen trunk behind you to block some of the wind. The fire responds immediately, its flame thickening and leaning into the calm pocket you created. As you study the firelight, you recall an odd frontier habit that modern people rarely hear about. Some pioneers believed that sleeping with one boot pointed toward the fire brought good luck, or at least spared them from waking with frozen toes. Did it work? Hard to know. But frontier letters mention the practice enough that you smile as you nudge one boot a little closer to the warmth. The leather begins to soften, releasing a faint, earthy smell that mixes with the pine-scented air. You lean forward, resting your elbows on your knees. Sparks pop upward, drifting into the night like tiny fireflies with short lives. They vanish quickly, absorbed by the surrounding snowstorm. You can almost hear the warmth dripping away from them, swallowed by the cold before they can rise too high. The fire becomes your anchor, holding you in place while the world moves relentlessly around you. You stare into the orange heart of the flames and wonder how much the pioneers understood about hypothermia, even without using scientific words. Some researchers today disagree on the extent of their medical knowledge. A few claim the settlers recognized the signs intuitively. Others argue that many travellers misinterpreted the symptoms, thinking exhaustion or sleepiness were harmless when they were anything but. You rest your chin on your scarf, letting the heat lick your cheeks, and feel acutely aware of how seductive the fire's comfort can be. You also know you cannot fall asleep too close. Roll over in your sleep and you might catch a spark. Stay too far away and the cold will claim its territory. You lay out your bedroll again this time, positioning it within arm's reach of the fire but still shielded by your little ridge of snow. You soften the ground beneath it with fir needles scattering them like a rustic mattress topper. The needles release a fresh resin scent that fills the air around you, creating a tiny oasis of forest warmth. You test the arrangement by lowering yourself onto it, feeling how the cold tries to seep upward, but is held off at least partly by the fire's gentle glow. Your fingers warm enough to regain their dexterity, and you take a moment to check your gear. The leather straps of your pack have stiffened. Your canteen feels colder than a river stone. You unscrew it, take a cautious sip and grimace at the icy water, but at least it is liquid. Many travellers learned quickly that keeping water inside a coat at night prevented it from turning solid by morning. You tuck the canteen under your coat, now pressing it against your ribs. The shock of cold makes you gasp, but your body heat begins to soften it almost immediately. The storm continues outside your little bubble, its voice rising and falling in long sighs. Snow slides off branches with muffled thumps. Somewhere in the distance, wood cracks again. You let the fire's glow play across your face, using your hands to warm each side of your cheeks. The heat makes your skin tingle pleasantly. Your eyelids soften a little, not with sleepiness exactly, but with a sense of being temporarily safe. You shift the firewood closer. Each stick is a treasure, now a little promise of comfort. You arrange them in careful stacks. Pioneers learned very quickly that firewood had to be rationed with the same diligence as food. A single night could consume a surprising amount of fuel, especially if the wind was hungry. You add one more stick, listening to it hiss and pop as moisture escapes. Your mind drifts to the countless anonymous travellers who slept just like this, wrapped in wool, and hope their faces warmed by fading embers. You imagine a young family huddled together under their canvas-covered wagon, the fire outside glowing faintly through the fabric. Someone tending the flames in the small hours, keeping them alive through sheer will. Out here, fire was not just heat. It was morale. It was the difference between despair and endurance. You roll onto your side, facing the fire. The glow reflects in your eyes, creating a flickering world made only of orange light and drifting shadows. The wind moans against your shelter, but the fire cracks back in quiet defiance. You pull your coat tighter around your shoulders and settle into the bedroll, letting your heartbeat slow again. You stretch your legs, shift your hips, and press your feet near the warmest edge of your bedding. The fire's heat creates a soft cushion around your body, thinning the cold enough for you to breathe calmly. Your breath rises and swirls in the warm air, spinning briefly before fading into the storm. The flames whisper and snap. Your eyelids lower a little more. The scent of pine smoke settles into your coat, becoming part of you. The warmth seeps into your palms. And for the first time tonight, you feel sleep tug gently at your thoughts, inviting you to drift. You let your body soften and trust the fire to watch over you for a little while. You wake some time later, though you do not remember falling asleep. The fire beside you has sagged into a bed of glowing coals, tiny ruby lights pulsing gently like the breathing of a sleeping animal. The warmth is faint, but still present, the kind of heat that brushes your skin rather than wraps around you. You shift slightly, and a shower of frost slips from your coat, drifting onto your cheek with a cool sting. When you wipe it away, your fingertips come back dusted in delicate crystals. Frost is creeping inward, decorating your hair, your bedroll, even the inside of your scarf. You sit up with a slow groan, the cold prying at your joints. You take a careful breath and notice that the air feels like it is trying to steal warmth straight from your lungs. Many frontier accounts mention how cold air could cause a tight needling ache in the chest, especially during sudden temperature drops. You feel that ache now, the cold sliding into your throat on each inhale. It does not hurt exactly, but it carries a warning tone. You cup your hands around your mouth and breathe into them, watching the steam bloom outward. Pioneers often relied on a simple trick to avoid chilling their lungs. They would fold a scarf or a wool scrap across their nose and mouth, letting the fabric warm each breath before it reached the chest. You pull your scarf up now, adjusting it so your breath fills the fabric and returns to you gentler, softened by your own heat. As the frost gathers around you, you take a moment to look closely at it. Each little crystal seems to glow faintly in the dim firelight, forming patterns that resemble tiny ferns. There is a peculiar bit of folklore whispered among old trail hands that frost growing outward from a sleeper's blanket meant the person inside was still warm enough to keep surviving the night. If the frost formed inward instead, trouble was coming. You test the idea with a small smile, gently brushing the frost from the outer edge of your coat. Sure enough, the crystals cling mostly to the outer layers. A good sign, perhaps, or merely a pleasing superstition. You stoke the fire with a stick, pushing the embers into a tighter cluster. They pulse brighter, sending up tiny sparks that crackle before vanishing. You add a small piece of wood and wait patiently as the flames slowly reclaim life. Fire is shy at this hour, hesitant, but it warms your palms as it rises. When the new flames catch, the orange glow spills outward, making the frost sparkle like powdered silver. Scholars sometimes disagree about how well the early mountain travelers understood the science of cold, but many agree they developed instinctive methods that worked astonishingly well. Some say pioneers had a kind of quiet genius for reading winter's signs. Others argue they learned solely through trial and costly error. You sit between those ideas, now knowing that instinct alone would not save you in a storm like this, yet feeling grateful for the simple methods that have kept countless sleepers safe through terrible weather. A gust of wind curls around your back. The storm has not passed. It has merely paused. You can hear it gathering strength in the distance, a low, restless rumble, like someone shuffling across a giant rug of snow. You wrap your coat tighter, rubbing your arms through the thick wool. The cold bites less fiercely now that the fire is awake again, but the air still presses hard on your skin. You watch frost grow along the edges of your bedroll. It spreads like lacework, fine and delicate. You run your fingers lightly across the surface, feeling how the crystals snap beneath your touch. Your breath puffs into the air, forming a small cloud that hangs longer than before. That is how you know the temperature has dropped again. The colder the world becomes, the slower your breath disperses. You take a sip of water from the canteen tucked under your coat. It is still liquid, but barely. The metal feels painfully cold against your lips. You take just one sip before tucking it away again, letting your body rewarm it. The taste of cold metal lingers on your tongue. The wind shifts, dragging a thin ribbon of snow across your ankles. You lift your legs slightly, brushing the snow away. With your fire awakened again, you consider your next move. You cannot sleep too close to the flames. The heat feels comforting now, but it will dry part of your coat unevenly, creating damp patches that freeze harder later. Trail veterans often mentioned that uneven evaporation could be more dangerous than the cold itself. Your bedroll is still usable, though stiff with cold. You adjust its position slightly, pulling it toward the fire but keeping a safe distance. The placement is delicate, like balancing warmth and caution on a knife edge. You smooth the surface again, clearing fresh frost with the side of your hand. The storm sends another gust across the plain, this one stronger. Snow lifts off the ground in swirling sheets that leap like startled birds. You pull your hat lower as the wind whistles past your ear, a cold note that makes you shiver. The sound is almost musical, though not in a comforting way. More like a flute played from far away by someone who does not care if the melody scares you. Frost collects on the tips of your eyebrows. You wipe it away gently. The cold is relentless, but not hopeless. You can still sense your own warmth fighting back. Your breath fills your scarf. Your core holds steady. Your fingers flex inside your glove, stiff but responsive. You settle once more onto the bedroll, letting the firelight soak into your skin. Your eyelids droop, tugged downward by the rhythm of the flames. The world grows softer around the edges. The wind continues to pace through the darkness, but your little circle of warmth pushes it back just far enough. The frost creeps and grows, but only on the outside where it belongs. You lie back slowly, feeling the cold press upward from the ground while the fire warms your face. It creates a strange balance, a push and pull of temperature that pioneers described often. One side of you freezes while the other side toasts gently. It is uncomfortable at first, then oddly soothing. Your breathing evens out. The fire crackles softly. Frost sparkles around you. The storm circles the plain like a patient hunter. But for now you are safe within your tiny island of warmth. You let your body sink deeper into the bedding, trusting the fire, trusting the scarf that protects your breath, trusting the slow rise and fall of your chest. You close your eyes again, letting the frost continue its quiet, shimmering work as the night stretches onward. You drift in and out of shallow sleep until a sharp blast of cold cuts across your neck, crisp enough to feel like a blade of winter itself. Your eyes snap open. The fire has thinned again, its glow faint and wavering, and the storm is shifting above you with new intentions. You sit up slowly, brushing a thin sheet of snow from your chest. The world looks slightly different now, as if the night has pressed closer, shrinking the horizon and leaving you in a smaller, more private pocket of cold. You stretch your arms, feeling stiffness settle into your joints. The ground beneath you has hardened even more. Whatever warmth your body lent it earlier has long since disappeared. You rise to your feet and glance around, searching for a better option. Tonight is not going to give you an easy rest. The wind is strengthening the sky, thickening, and the air feels heavier with new flakes waiting to fall. It is time to choose the right shelter, the sort of choice pioneers learn to make with instinct sharpened by years of hardship. You sling your pack over one shoulder and step cautiously into the darkness. Your boots break through thin crusts of ice with brittle clicks. Snow whirls in unpredictable patterns, sometimes drifting lazily, sometimes throwing itself against your coat as if testing your resolve. You scan the terrain through narrowing eyes, trying to spot anything that could offer real protection. A ledge carved into the side of a rocky outcrop catches your attention first. It stands a short walk away, the stone dark and silent beneath a coating of snow. Travellers who left written accounts described how shallow rock overhangs could offer life-saving relief when storms turned violent. The stone blocked wind better than any canvas or wooden structure, and the dryness beneath it often meant a warmer sleeping spot. You approach it now, feeling a small flicker of hope. As you draw closer, you see the slope above the overhang, heavy with unstable snow that looks ready to slide. Too risky. One shift of the wind could send a sheet of snow tumbling down onto your head. The idea of waking buried is enough to make you step back immediately. You turn away and move toward a thick cluster of pines. Their branches bend under the snow, forming a dense canopy, where the wind sounds muffled and distant. The trees exhale the familiar scent of sap and frost. A lesser-known observation from trappers and mountain men noted that pine thickets often held slightly warmer air beneath their branches, because they trapped heat rising from the ground. You duck your head and slip between the trunks. The needles tickle your coat, and snow cascades onto your shoulders in soft bursts. Inside the thicket, the storm becomes quieter. Snow falls like sifted flour instead of icy pellets. You kneel and inspect the ground. It is uneven, dotted with roots and soft depressions. You brush aside a patch of snow, finding damp earth beneath it. Not ideal, but workable with enough layering. Still, your instincts pull you onward. There must be something better. You leave the pines and walk toward the faint outline of a shallow dip in the land where snow has gathered in gentler drifts. Some early settlers preferred small hollows because the ground dipped below the reach of the worst wind. But opinions differed sharply, and even historians today have lively disagreements about whether hollows were smart or foolish. Some argue that they offered excellent wind protection. Others believe they acted like cold traps collecting frigid air that settled overnight. You stand at the edge now, unsure which interpretation to trust. You crouch and touch the ground. It is cold but not icy, and the snow above it is loose rather than crusted. You sweep your hand through it, feeling how it falls apart easily. That looseness means the wind has not carved this spot aggressively. It could work. But then something catches your eye, a set of shallow footprints leading toward a small depression tucked against a natural stone curve. Curious, you follow them. The depression is not deep, no more than the height of your knee, but the curve of stone behind it blocks the wind perfectly. The snow here is thin and powdery, untouched by the harsher gusts. A perfect compromise between exposure and airflow. You smile faintly. This is the place. You drop your pack and begin clearing a sleeping area with steady, deliberate motions. Snow flies in graceful arcs as you carve out a smooth oval. Your breath billows through your scarf, warming your lips as you work. The stone at your back radiates a subtle coolness, but it also creates a protective barrier. You can almost feel the wind splitting around it. You gather fallen branches from the nearby pines, snapping off what you can without damaging the living trees. The wood feels dry enough to be useful. You arrange it carefully, setting aside small twigs for quick-burning warmth, and thicker branches for longer-lasting heat. You know fire might be tricky here, but even embers could help. As you prepare your bedding, you remember a strange belief passed around in early frontier communities. Some travellers insisted that the earth beneath certain types of rock felt warmer, as if the stone absorbed and held daytime heat longer. Whether it was true or not, people swore by it. You press your palm against the stone now. It feels cold, yet somehow less severe than the open air. Maybe the old stories had a hint of truth, or maybe fatigue makes you optimistic. You spread your bedroll, smoothing out the stiff wrinkles. The fabric feels unwelcoming at first, but you know it will soften once your body warms it. You pull scattered fur needles over the edges to create a little insulation and tuck your coat more securely around your torso. The wind tries its best to reach you, sending occasional gusts that brush the edge of your shelter, but the stone deflects the worst of it. Snow patters gently against the outer curve, soft and harmless. You feel like you've stepped into a small cave shaped by time and necessity. You take one last look at the sky. The night hangs heavy with swirling flakes, but this spot has a calm pocket of air that feels almost friendly. You lower yourself into your bedroll, letting your body sink into the small hollow you created. The ground is still cold, but not unbearably so. Your breath steadies, your heartbeat slows, your shoulders loosen. This shelter may not be perfect, but it is smart, practical, chosen the way countless travellers chose theirs on bitter nights, when the weather cared nothing for human comfort. You settle deeper into your blanket, feeling the stone curve at your back, the quiet pine-scented air around you, and the faint promise of rest. You let your eyes close again, trusting the little haven you built with your own hands. You wake again to the unmistakable rattle of wind dragging across canvas that is not supposed to be there. Only after a few groggy blinks do you remember you left your wagon behind on the trail earlier. The sound you heard was your bedroll snapping faintly as the storm tugged at its edges. You exhale slowly, gathering your focus, then rise onto numb elbows. Your breath clouds in front of you, drifting upward like a pale ghost disappearing into the night. The storm has thickened. Snow blows in ragged sheets, swirling fast enough to sting your eyes when you squint into it. You fold your scarf higher around your nose and look toward the distant shape of your wagon parked where you left it near the tree line. The idea of turning that wagon into a temporary shelter appeals more and more with each bite of the cold. You stand, stretch stiff legs and begin trudging toward it, boots sinking deep into soft drifts. When you reach the wagon, the wooden wheels are half buried in snow. The canvas cover strains in the wind, making jittery thumping noises that match your heartbeat a little too closely. Pioneers learned quickly that wagons could become makeshift shelters in storms like this. Diaries from the overland trails mention how families often crawled beneath them, relying on the wooden frame as a windshield, rather than sleeping inside where drafts slipped through gaps and cold pooled against the canvas roof. You brush snow from the wagon's side, feeling the wood beneath your gloves. The planks are rough and cold but solid. You crouch and lift the canvas hanging from one end. A breath of warmer, trapped air escapes, touching your cheek for just a moment before the storm snatches it away. You crawl underneath, dragging your pack behind you. The underside of the wagon feels like an odd sanctuary. The wood overhead creaks gently and the floorboards block the worst of the wind. Snow piles along the edges but leaves the centre mostly dry. A few pioneers swore they slept best under wagons, claiming the earth below stayed warmer than the wagon's interior. You position your bedroll in the centre, pressing your palm to the ground. It is still cold, but there is a faint softness to it compared to the open air outside. While adjusting your bedding, you recall a strange frontier belief that sleeping under a wagon brought good dreams, while sleeping inside brought nightmares. No one knows where the story started. Maybe families with restless children preferred placing them under the wagon where the cold forced them to stay still. Maybe it was simply a folk tale passed along to soothe anxious travellers. You smile faintly as you tuck your blanket's edge beneath your hip. You will take any dream tonight, good or bad, as long as it comes with warmth. The wind outside roars like distant surf and the wagon trembles slightly. Few modern historians have noted that travellers often underestimated how dangerously cold the interior of a wagon could become in winter. Some experts believe people used wagons incorrectly in early years, assuming canvas could protect them from mountain storms when it rarely did. Others argue the wagons were not meant for sleeping at all, merely for hauling goods, and that using them as shelter was always a compromise. Listening to the wind batter the canvas, now you understand why opinions on the subject vary so much. You strike a spark from your flint, careful not to let it touch the wooden beams above you. You do not need a fire here, only a small ember to warm your fingers. A scrap of cloth catches, briefly glowing like a watchful eye before fading. You warm your hands beside it until circulation tingles painfully back into your fingertips. You settle onto your bedroll, adjusting your coat so that your spine rests against a line of wooden slats. The frame is cool but not icy, and its solidity gives you a surprising sense of comfort. When the wind strikes the wagon, the vibration travels through your shoulders like a gentle nudge. You breathe through your scarf, watching frost collect on the fabric. Your eyelashes grow heavy again with tiny crystals. You blink slowly, letting them melt. Under the wagon, the darkness feels thicker, quieter. The storm outside becomes a distant whirl that does not quite reach you. You stretch your legs, flexing your toes inside stiff boots. The space is tight, only a foot or so between you and the wood above, but the closeness helps hold your warmth. You tuck the edges of your coat beneath your legs, forming a small cocoon. Snow drifts build slowly along the wagon's outer edges, muffling the sounds. You can hear only the rhythmic drum of snow hitting canvas and the soft scuff of wind swirling around the wheels. Your heartbeat steadies, your breath slows. The wooden frame above you groans from time to time, but not in a threatening way, more like an old friend resettling into place. The darkness thickens further, inviting sleep. The underside of the wagon becomes a world of its own, a small wooden shelter holding you fast while the storm prowls outside. You let your thoughts drift. You feel the cold nibbling at the edges of your coat, but failing to reach your core. Your body warms the bedroll inch by inch. Your eyes close fully now. The storm continues, but you are sheltered. A rough wooden roof protects you. The earth cushions you, and your own warmth begins to gather and expand, small and determined in the quiet. You take a final slow breath and let it release into the darkness as sleep pulls you under steady and sure. You come awake to a strange stillness, the kind that makes the hairs on your arms rise even before you open your eyes. The wind has stopped. Completely. The wagon no longer trembles, the canvas no longer sighs. The sudden quiet feels unnatural, as though the entire storm has paused to take a single long breath. You push yourself upright, blinking at the dim grey glow that filters through the edges of the wagon. Snow has piled high around the wheels, creating a hushed, insulated silence. The air is colder now, tight and biting, but somehow gentler without the raging wind. You crawl out from beneath the wagon and step into a world muted by deep snow. Your boots sink instantly into soft drifts. The sky is a pale blur. The storm has not ended. It has simply changed its mood. Snowflakes float downward with dreamy slowness, drifting in quiet spirals as if gravity has become optional. You brush frost from your eyebrows and take a slow breath, noticing how the cold slides into your lungs with a painful sharpness. Your little shelter served you well, but if the wind returns stronger than before, the wagon alone may not be enough. You scan the landscape, searching for something nature-built, something sturdier. A cluster of snow-laden boulders catches your eye. They rise from the earth like a row of ancient shoulders, offering their stone backs to the storm. You trudged past them earlier, without noticing much, but now you see a hollow between two rocks partially filled with snow. A shallow overhang forms a natural pocket that could become a shelter if you shape it. You approach the rocks, brushing snow aside with your gloved hands. You press your palm against the stone, expecting harsh cold, but the surface feels slightly warmer than the air. Travellers from earlier centuries often wrote that large stones held onto daytime heat longer than you might expect. You test the idea yourself, resting your fingers against the rock until they tingle with returning sensation. Still, the hollow is too small. You kneel and sweep snow outward, widening the space. As you carve out the drift, you remember reading how winter explorers sometimes use snow itself as insulation. Not packed into walls exactly, but shaped into a semi-solid form that trapped warm air inside. You scoop handfuls of loose powder and press them gently into the edges, forming an arch that deepens the space without inviting collapse. A curious old belief lingers in the back of your mind, something mentioned in a faded account from a mountain guide. He claimed that snow listened to how you handled it. Treat it roughly and it collapsed. Treat it with patience and it supported you. Superstition, perhaps, but you find yourself working carefully anyway, smoothing each section with the back of your wrist. The snow firms into a curved surface surprisingly strong. Once the hollow is shaped, you crawl inside and sit for a moment in the new shelter. The sound of falling snow becomes softer. Your breath warms the small space, quickly gathering along the inner walls in a thin mist. It feels odd sitting inside a hollow made of frozen water, relying on it for warmth. Yet the effect works. The cold loses its bite in this confined space. Some modern researchers have pointed out that pioneers probably had a patchwork understanding of how snow caves functioned. They might not have understood the physics of trapped air, but they observed the results. Other scholars counter that many early travellers avoided enclosed snow shelters, entirely fearing suffocation. Even the experts cannot agree on how common these shelters were. You shift your position, feeling the snow arch support your spine without crumbling, and you imagine those arguments playing out in thick university books while you sit inside the real thing. You crawl back out, retrieving your bedroll from the wagon. Snow clings to its edges like cake frosting. You shake it vigorously, sending white powder flying. Then you slide into the hollow once more, positioning the bedroll across the flattest part of the floor. The fabric stiffens as it touches the cold ground, but your body will soften it soon enough. You settle down, adjusting your coat to seal any stray openings. The shelter feels surprisingly cozy, though the word cozy feels like a generous exaggeration in this weather. Still, the snow blocks the wind fully and the stone walls hold the space steady. You can breathe without frost forming instantly on your scarf. That alone feels luxurious. You pull your pack closer and take a careful sip from your canteen. The water is shockingly cold, like a punch to the teeth. You swallow quickly and place the canteen near your stomach beneath your coat, letting your body heat protected again. It nestles against your ribs with a chilling weight, but you know the warmth will spread. Slowly your breathing steadies. The snow shelter dims the outside world, making the space feel almost womb-like. Sound becomes muted, smoothed at the edges. You hear only the faint hiss of falling snow and your own quiet breaths. You lie on your side, running your fingers along the curved wall. The snow is firm but pleasantly cold. It glitters faintly where your fire-dimmed eyes catch the light. You can almost imagine you are lying inside a frozen lantern. Your mind drifts to the countless wanderers who might have done the same, shaping snow into sanctuary with nothing but numb hands and hope. Some used sticks to test the ceiling. Others whispered small thanks to the mountains for giving them a place to rest. You do not speak aloud, but your heartbeat feels like its own kind of gratitude. The cold outside deepens, but the shelter holds firm. The arch remains intact. Your breath warms the small air pocket near your face. You tuck your hands beneath your coat, feeling blood return to your fingertips in slow pulses. The snow whispers as it falls, brushing softly against the curved roof. You listen to the gentle sound until your eyelids grow heavy. The hollow around you becomes a cocoon of muted stormlight and faint warmth. Your body sinks deeper into the bedroll. Your breathing slows. Here in this fragile cave of snow and stone, sleep finally finds you slipping over your thoughts like a warm blanket you never expected to have. You wake to a damp heaviness clinging to your shoulders, and for a moment you cannot tell if it is fear or moisture. When you shift, the answer becomes obvious. Your wool coat is wet along the arms, and the cold has turned that moisture into a stiff, icy crust. You lift your sleeve to your nose and inhale. The sharp, unmistakable smell of wet wool rises like a tired warning bell. It is earthy, almost animal-like, and it drags an involuntary grimace from you. Wet wool has its own personality, stubborn and sour, the sort of scent that refuses to leave until it dries completely. You push yourself upright in the snow hollow, stretching your cramped muscles. The shelter has held through the night, but your clothing has not. Frost melts inside the folds of your scarf, leaving it clammy against your skin. You pull it off and shake it gently, sending a flurry of crystals into the dim air. The cold rushes in through your exposed neck, but at least the fabric will dry faster without your breath soaking it. Once outside the hollow, the storm greets you with a soft, steady snowfall that drifts down silently like cold ash. There is no wind yet, only a stillness that feels temporary. You know you need fire, but starting one in this dampness will be trouble. Pioneers often noted that drying wet wool near an open flame required careful attention. Too close and you scorched the fibres. Too far and the fabric stayed miserably damp. Their journals describe a strategy of laying garments on sticks arranged like a miniature fence, giving the wool room to dry without touching the heat directly. You begin gathering branches with that advice in mind. The first few pieces are brittle with frost, their bark breaking into powdery flakes when you bend them. But beneath the snow you find a pine branch still sticky with sap. Sap means hope. Sap means burnable. You strip off smaller twigs and arrange them on a patch of cleared ground. Your hand shakes slightly as you strike the flint, and for a long moment sparks fall uselessly into the snow. Then finally a thin thread of smoke curls upward, followed by a shy flicker of flame. You crouch low, feeding the fire small twigs until it grows stable enough to warm your fingers. The air around the flame takes on the scent of pine resin, sweet and faintly medicinal. You rub your hands together, feeling life return to your fingertips in little bursts of discomfort. When the fire is steady, you stick 2 forked branches into the snow, placing a few crosswise sticks between them. This becomes your drying rack. You drape your scarf and outer layer of wool across it in careful folds. The smell thickens in the warm air and you wrinkle your nose. Few people today know just how potent drying wool can smell, but records from emigrant camps mention evenings scented with damp blankets and steaming coats, each traveller contributing their own smoky cloud of pungent odour. If you were not alone, you would be sitting in a communal fog of shared dampness right now. As the heat seeps into your coat, curls of steam rise from the fabric, twisting like tiny ghosts above the fire. You place your boots near the edge of the warmth, but not too close. Frontier travellers often spoke of cracked leather caused by overzealous drying, and you're not eager to repeat their mistakes. You nudge the boots a little farther from the flames, letting the warmth coax the dampness out slowly. While checking your rack, you remember an old mountain superstition about wet wool. Some early travellers insisted that the garment remembered the weather that soaked it. According to them, if you dried a coat too quickly, it might betray you later by absorbing moisture faster the next time. Of course, whether this was true or just trail lore will never be settled, but the story nags at you enough to handle your clothing with gentle patience. You sit closer to the fire and take a slow breath. The heat presses softly against your cold cheeks, drying the last remnants of frost. Snow continues to fall quietly around you, landing delicately on your boots and melting before it settles. The smell of moist wool grows stronger for a moment, then slowly fades as the fabric begins to dry properly. Your coat still clings to patches of dampness, but you feel it gradually loosening, becoming more flexible again. You lift the edges, holding them closer to the fire to test the warmth, then drape them back on the sticks. Steam rises steadily. Behind you, the mountains loom in a pale haze. Their presence feels steady, comforting even. You listen to the soft crackling of the fire and the faint hiss of snow touching the hot wood. Your breath floats upward in a thin ribbon. Sometime during the quiet moments, your thoughts drift to how differently winter shelters are interpreted today. Some modern researchers suggest pioneers handled moisture better than we assume, having grown up in climates where rain was constant. Others argue that many travellers underestimated the danger letting damp clothes sap their body heat until exhaustion overtook them. Both views carry weight, and sitting here with steaming wool and a chilly spine, you can believe either side. After a long while, you lift your scarf. It is warm now, almost soft again. You wrap it gently around your neck, savouring the comfort. The familiar texture reassures you. Your coat is nearly dry as well, its smell fading back to something earthy but tolerable. You stand brushing snow from your knees. The fire glows at your feet, the coals deepening in colour. You warm your palms one more time, feeling heat seep into your bones. Now clothed in something almost resembling warmth again, you prepare to face whatever the storm intends next. The scent of pine smoke lingers in your hair as you shoulder your pack and glance toward the mountains. Your wool is dry, your fire still burns, and the day is just beginning. You step forward, leaving the steaming patch behind as snow floats gently around you. You trudge forward through the soft rising snow until the silence around you begins to feel oddly spacious, as if the whole landscape has taken a long breath and forgotten to exhale. The stillness unnerves you more than the storm. Too quiet, too soft. Your boots sink deeply into drifts that feel freshly laid untouched by wind. Your body is warmer now that your wool has dried, but the cold still nibbles at the edges of your fingers. A part of you aches for companionship, for the simple comfort of another human presence in this vast white emptiness. You crest a small rise and pause. There, tucked between a line of snow-laden pines, lies a shallow depression already stamped with footprints. Smaller prints, human ones. You approach cautiously, heart lifting a little despite the cold. When you reach the hollow, you find the faint remains of a fire, and beside it the unmistakable impression of several bodies having slept shoulder to shoulder. The snow around them has melted and refrozen, forming a smooth surface that glints faintly. The sight sparks a memory from trail journals written generations ago. Travellers often slept close together during bitter storms, not out of affection or camaraderie, but because pooled body heat could mean the difference between waking with stiff fingers and not waking at all. Accounts speak plainly of the practice, describing how strangers and friends alike pressed side by side in their blankets, sharing warmth without embarrassment. You imagine those sleepers curled in a tight cluster, breathing into one another's scarves, each pulse lending life to the next. You crouch and place your hand on the depression. The earth is cold now, the warmth long gone, but you can almost hear echoes of whispered conversations, shifting limbs and steady breathing. You picture yourself joining them, your body tucked between others, feeling the shared warmth ripple across the group. As you study the footprints surrounding the spot, you notice something odd. A circular pattern of melted snow sits just outside the main sleeping area, as if someone placed a heated stone or metal pot there. The idea makes you pause. Some experienced frontier families warm small rocks by the fire and wrap them in scraps of cloth before placing them at their feet. A technique rarely mentioned in modern summaries, yet it appears in scattered personal letters. You imagined someone last night lifting such a rock from a pile of coals, wrapping it tight, and pressing it against their toes while settling into the human huddle. A tiny island of warmth in a frozen world. You stand and glance around. The forest feels watchful, branches drooping heavily beneath the snow. Your breath drifts upward in little clouds that dissolve almost instantly. You consider staying here and recreating the communal sleeping pit for yourself, but alone it will not work. Without additional bodies, the spot offers no advantage. You need to move on, though you carry with you the lingering comfort of knowing others passed through this very place. You gather a handful of pine needles, crush them gently between your gloved fingers, and breathe in their sharp, resinous scent. The aroma wakes your senses and reminds you of a detail you once heard from an old naturalist. He claimed that pine-rich air near a cluster of sleepers sometimes grew warm enough to loosen frost from beards and hair. Whether that claim stands up to modern scrutiny depends on who you ask. Some researchers dismiss it as romantic exaggeration, insisting no group of bodies could warm the air that much. Others argue that in enclosed spaces like under thick tree canopies, it might have been possible. Standing among these loaded branches now, you can almost believe the softer interpretation. You follow the footprints a little farther, seeing how they weave between trees before eventually disappearing beneath new snow. You wonder who walked here. A family, a pair of traders. Someone travelling alone until they met others desperate for warmth. The thought stays with you as you move, warming your imagination even as the cold returns to your coat. The landscape opens into a clearing where the snow lies smooth and perfect, untouched except by falling flakes. You stand in the centre, feeling small under the winter sky. The clouds above shift lazily, pregnant with more snow. You tuck your chin deeper into your scarf and rub your hands together, trying to summon warmth from friction alone. The cold grows sharper, slicing lightly through the layers of your coat. You find yourself longing for the simple closeness of another body, not conversation, not companionship, just proximity. Pioneers understood instinctively that survival depended on shared heat. Even the most stoic diaries mention nights spent lying in tight clusters, silently grateful for the warmth of strangers. Some accounts even describe groups arranging themselves in alternating directions, so heads rested next to feet, preventing the exhaled breath of one person from freezing onto the face of another. Practical, if not exactly dignified. You cross the clearing and stand at the edge of another cluster of pines. The branches form a natural canopy above you, and the snow lands lightly on the needles before falling in slow clumps. A strange hush settles over you, the kind that muffles even your own heartbeat. You drop your pack and sit with your back to a trunk, letting the tree support your weight. The bark is cool and textured beneath your coat. You close your eyes and picture the warmth of shared sleep, trying to remember the sensation of lying shoulder to shoulder beside another person. Even in imagination, it brings a subtle comfort. The air around you feels heavy with quiet. When you open your eyes again, the world is painted in silver and white, the snowfall gentle but persistent. You draw your coat tighter around your ribs and think of the sleepers who once huddled together in the depression behind you. You can almost feel the rhythm of their breathing, the shared warmth rising and falling in tandem. Eventually, the cold pushes its way through your layers again, reminding you that you cannot rest long without losing heat. You shoulder your pack and stand brushing snow from your coat. Before you leave, you glance back toward the depression. It sits half filled with fresh flakes now already fading into the landscape. You take one last deep breath, letting the pine-scented air fill your lungs. Then you turn away from the memory of shared warmth and resume your solitary trek through the soft falling snow, the echo of that human closeness following you like a fading ember in the winter dark. You press forward through the trees until your stomach gives a low, hollow twist that reminds you how long it has been since you last ate anything substantial. Hunger settles into your body differently in the cold. It sharpens the edges of your thoughts, makes each footstep feel heavier, and wraps a faint dizziness around the back of your head. Even the air smells faintly metallic now, as if your senses are stretching themselves thin just to stay alert. You slow your pace and reach into your pack, fingers searching through stiff cloth and rattling containers until they touch a small cloth-wrapped bundle. You pull it free and sit on a fallen log dusted with snow. When you unfold the cloth, the meagre rations inside greet you without enthusiasm. A piece of hardtack chipped at the corners, a sliver of salted pork stiff as a plank, and a pinch of dried berries that look more like shriveled pebbles. Not a feast, but a necessity. Midnight meals became a quiet ritual for many winter travellers. Worn trail accounts describe how cold weather appetite worked differently than summer appetite. People ate not to feel full, but to keep their inner fires burning through the night. That practice echoes now as you break off a piece of the hardtack. The biscuit is so rigid you have to soften it with a splash of water from your canteen. You watch the surface darken as it absorbs moisture. Only then do you bite into it, feeling your jaw protest with a low ache. You chew slowly, letting the bland taste settle on your tongue. The berries follow, offering a sweetness that barely qualifies as comfort. You wash them down with a sip of icy water, wincing at the sting against your teeth. Salted pork comes last. You nibble it carefully, feeling the salt wake your mouth and the fat coat your tongue. It tastes harsh, but there is strength in it, the kind that spreads through your limbs in small determined waves. A whimsical old belief comes to mind while you eat. Some frontier families swore that nibbling a corner of hardtack before lying down on frozen ground encouraged steadier breathing during sleep, as if the body recognised the density of the biscuit and responded with deeper, more measured breaths. Whether it ever truly helped or simply distracted hungry minds, no one can say. You tilt your head amused and take another bite just for the sake of the story. Not all scholars today agree on how vital these nighttime calories were. Some argue that the added fuel truly extended a traveller's endurance in brutal weather. Others claim the psychological comfort mattered more than the nutritional value, and that pioneers might have survived just as well without the ritual. Sitting here feeling warmth slowly return to your core, you suspect the answer lies somewhere in between. Food does not fight the cold alone, but the steady reassurance of eating anything shapes the way your body faces the night. Your breath curls upward with each exhale, drifting in soft ribbons into the dark branches above you. The forest listens quietly, absorbing the tiny sounds of chewing, shifting fabric and crunching snow. When you finish your meal, you fold the cloth, carefully brushing crumbs from your gloves. Hardtack dust clings stubbornly to your fingertips, rough and gritty. You wipe your hand on your thigh and stand feeling a small surge of energy. The snow glows faintly under the dim light filtering through the clouds. Everything looks softer now, as if the storm has draped the world in cotton. Your stomach no longer twists. Instead, a faint warmth begins to pulse gently from your centre outward. You stretch your arms, rolling your shoulders to loosen them and draw a long breath through your scarf. As you move onward, you notice how the landscape reflects your changed state. Shapes appear sharper. Shadows deepen. Your steps feel steadier. You step carefully over a fallen branch, its bark buried beneath a dusting of snow. A few flakes land on your eyelashes, melting instantly with the heat from your skin. You walk until the trees thin again, opening into a clearing where the snow lies untouched. The silence here feels heavier, more profound. You pause, listening. In the distance, something rustles. Maybe a deer shifting its weight beneath the pines. Maybe the sigh of a branch releasing collected snow. Whatever it is, the sound is small and unthreatening. Your hand brushes the last crumb of hardtack from your coat, sending it tumbling onto the snow. A few birds might feast on it by morning. You tuck your scarf tighter around your throat and take another slow breath. The cold still bites, but your body feels steadier now, anchored by the small practical act of eating. You continue your journey through the pale clearing, the faint sweetness of dried berries lingering on your tongue, and the salty warmth of pork settling deep in your chest. Ahead lies more snow, more night, more cold. But the simple meal has reawakened something inside you, a little spark that promises you can keep going. And out here that spark can mean everything. You walk deeper into the clearing until a prickle crawls across the back of your neck, the kind that rises not from cold but from instinct. The forest behind you has gone strangely quiet. Even the snow seems to fall more cautiously, as though something has paused it mid-air. You turn your head slightly, listening with the kind of attention that tightens every muscle in your shoulders. There it is. A soft shuffle against crusted snow, then another. A low throaty yip floating just above the hush of the storm. Coyotes. You exhale slowly, trying not to let your pulse leap too fast. The sound is not close, not yet, but neither is it far. You scan the tree line, seeing nothing but grey shadows and tall pines heavy with frost. The quiet between the calls feels tense, waiting. You pull your coat tighter, your eyes adjusting to the subtle shifts in the dimness. Old travellers wrote often about this very sensation, that moment when sleep tries to claim you. But wild creatures interrupt with their own nighttime routines. Coyotes were not usually a mortal threat to healthy adults, but hunger could push them closer to camps than anyone liked. Pioneers described nights when a lone howl echoed across the plains, answered by a chorus that rippled along the ridges, keeping entire wagon parties awake. You feel the echo of those stories now as another yip breaks the silence. You move carefully to the edge of the clearing, making sure your boots crack loudly on the ice. Noise travels easily tonight, and pioneers learned early that making yourself known often kept coyotes at a distance. You remember another odd method they swore by scattering the scent of burned cloth or hair around camp, believing it signaled human fire, which coyotes instinctively avoided. Even reading about it later, you were never sure how effective it truly was. But travellers tried anything that offered reassurance. You bend down and scoop up a handful of snow, rubbing it briskly between your palms. The cold sting wakes your fingers. You raise your head again, tracking the sound of the coyotes as their calls shift slightly. The pack is moving, weaving through the trees in a slow arc. You cannot see them, but you feel their presence in the way the forest holds its breath. Some researchers today suggest that coyotes in the 19th century behaved differently from those now. Not necessarily bolder, but hungrier during harsh winters when settlers took over hunting territories and disrupted natural food sources. Other historians argue the opposite, insisting the animals kept a respectful distance unless desperation overcame caution. Listening to the distant yips now, you can imagine either version being true. Hunger changes everything. You crouch near a tree, running your hand along the rough bark. The trunk feels cold but grounded, as if it has seen countless nights like this and weathered them without complaint. Snow slips from a branch above you and lands on your shoulder. You brush it off, trying to steady your breath. To calm your nerves, you think of the stories in which coyotes served as nighttime companions of a sort, their voices guiding lonely travellers across frozen plains. Some wagon trains reportedly use the animals' calls as rough orientation tools, since the sound often bounced from ridge to ridge, revealing nearby terrain. Whether that technique was practical or just poetic is difficult to determine. But on nights when the wind swallowed all other landmarks, those voices may have mattered more than we realise. The coyotes call again, closer this time. Not dangerously close, but near enough that your skin prickles. You stand lifting your chin, knowing full well that they can sense fear as easily as warmth. The snow beneath your boots crunches loudly as you shift your weight. You pull your scarf higher around your neck and reach into your pack for a small tin cup. You tap it lightly with a metal spoon, creating a sharp ringing that slices cleanly through the stillness. The sound travels surprisingly far. A pause follows. You imagine the coyotes lifting their heads, listening with pricked ears. You tap again, a third time. Then let the cup fall against your coat in a soft thud. Another yip rises from the trees, but it sounds farther away now. You wait, counting your breaths. 2 more distant calls echo, then fade. The forest around you slowly exhales. You lower the tin cup and tuck it back into your pack. Relief washes through you gradually, not all at once. The coyotes are still out there, but they have moved on, perhaps uninterested, perhaps cautious. Either way, you have bought yourself time. You shift closer to the base of a large pine and sit for a moment, letting your heart settle. The needles above you shiver faintly as snow drifts through them. Up close, the tree's scent is sharp and slightly minty, a soothing contrast to the metallic bite of the cold. You lean your head back, feeling the bark press into your hat. Your thoughts wander again to those who travelled this land long before you. Many accounts mention coyotes not just as threats, but as symbols. To some, their calls represented a kind of frontier lullaby. To others, they were harbingers of bad luck, especially when heard alone rather than in chorus. A single coyote at night was considered an omen by more than one diary writer. You glance into the woods, listening. Tonight the pack moved as a group, which you take as a reassuring sign, even if you do not fully believe the superstition. The snow continues falling soft and endless. Your stomach no longer aches from hunger, but fatigue begins to weave its gentle threads into your limbs. You rise from the pine, shaking snow from your coat. The clearing looks different now, softer along the edges, as though the snowfall has been repainting it while you were distracted. You make your way toward a cluster of low shrubs, their branches bowed under the weight of frost. You brush snow aside and find a sheltered spot where the wind cannot reach you easily. It is not perfect, but it will give you a moment of rest before you continue. You kneel, lowering yourself carefully onto your bedroll. The cold rises to greet you, but gently this time, like a familiar companion rather than a predator. You adjust your scarf and tuck your hands beneath your coat, watching your breath curl into the dim air. The forest is quiet again, except for the falling snow. No more yips, no rustling paws, just silence. You close your eyes for a few beats, letting the quiet soak into your skin. Far off, the memory of the coyotes lingers in the air, but their voices no longer unsettle you. They were simply part of the night part of the rhythm of this frozen world. Your breathing slows, the snowfall deepens, and once again the dark begins to settle around you like a heavy blanket, ready to pull you gently toward the next part of your journey. You rise from your shallow rest when the world around you feels subtly altered, as if someone has shifted the landscape while you were not looking. The air tastes sharper. The quiet has a brittle edge. You stand and brush snow from your coat, watching the flakes fall in slow spirals. Somewhere above the clouds, dawn is trying to loosen the night's grip, but no light reaches you yet. You begin walking, boots crunching steadily through deepening drifts. The forest thins, gradually letting a faint horizon appear through the grey haze. You step onto open ground again, and pause. Your tracks behind you look fragile, already half filled by freshly fallen snow. You take another step and look back once more. Your boot print is barely recognizable now, its edges swallowed by the storm's quiet persistence. You realize with a cold twist in your stomach that the longer you walk, the more the storm erases your path. This was a common winter fear for westbound travelers. Many wagon diaries mention how overnight snow could make roads disappear entirely, turning familiar routes into blank, featureless stretches. The snow did not need to be deep. Even a few inches falling quickly could wipe away every sign of earlier passage. You kneel to study the ground more carefully. The fresh snow forms a smooth, undulating skin over the land. Beneath it lie hidden ruts, stones, branches. You drag your gloved fingers through the top layer, revealing a faint line beneath perhaps a wagon rut, or maybe just a natural dip. Hard to tell. You step forward again, scanning for any shapes that could guide you. Fallen trees, subtle rises, clusters of brush that might have marked the trail before the storm began its quiet sabotage. The sameness of everything unnerves you. The landscape feels blank, as though the world has forgotten itself. A peculiar memory surfaces, something you once read in a journal written by a teenage girl who travelled these mountains with her family. She described her father tossing handfuls of ashes into the snow during storms to create dark speckles that helped them gauge direction for a short time. The marks did not last long, she said, but they lasted long enough. Whether this was common or simply her family's invention remains unclear, but the idea lingers in your thoughts. You glance down at the snow under your boots, imagining dark flecks guiding you like breadcrumbs. You continue onward, though uneasiness grows with each step. A faint wind lifts the surface snow and slides it across the ground in thin, snake-like ribbons. The movement is mesmerizing but disorienting. It creates the illusion of shifting ridges and moving pathways, tricking your eyes into believing the trail extends in every direction at once. Modern researchers who study trail navigation often bring up winter travel as one of the most misunderstood challenges of the overland routes. Some suggest that early travellers relied more on instinct and memory than maps. Others argue that groups often veered dangerously off course, guided by false confidence in their own internal compass. Watching your footprints vanish behind you, you can appreciate how easily a person might wander in circles without ever realising it. You stop for a moment and listen. Sound carries differently without solid landmarks. You close your eyes and try to feel the landscape instead of seeing it. A faint downward pull suggests the land slopes to your left. Open plains tend to dip gently where old riverbeds lie buried under snow. You trust the instinct and begin moving toward that subtle decline. Snow drifts against your shins, dragging at your steps, but the slope becomes more noticeable. Trees grow sparser here, their silhouettes fading into the quiet mist. Your breath fogs your vision briefly. When it clears, you see a faint break in the terrain ahead, a small depression in the ground. You descend carefully, testing each step. The dip is shallow, but the snow has filled it completely, smoothing its contours until it seems almost intentional. You kneel and sweep snow away with brisk strokes until you find a hard ridged surface. Wood, a fallen log. Perhaps even part of a crude marker once placed by previous travellers. It reassures you to find something solid beneath all the whiteness. You keep moving, tracing the land's faint cues. The snow masks almost everything, but the body remembers patterns the eyes cannot see. You follow the slope downward until you reach a narrow band of brush half buried under snow. Their tops poke through like brittle fingers. The trail might have passed close to brush like this. As you walk the ground levels out again, the world looks uniform once more. If not for the faint indentation left by buried plants, you might believe you had looped back to your starting point. The storm presses inward with quiet insistence, trying to erase every sign of direction. Your breath grows shallow. You close your eyes briefly and imagine how many travellers long before you stood in nearly identical snowfields, hearts hammering, unsure which way led to shelter and which led deeper into the storm. Some accounts describe people marking their path by breaking branches or planting sticks upright in the drifts. Others mention tying strips of cloth to tree limbs to leave faint hints for those who followed. The methods varied wildly, and contemporary experts still disagree about which techniques proved most effective. Looking around at the acres of blank white, you cannot fault anyone for doubting any method at all. You stop again and inhale deeply through your scarf. The air is cold enough to numb your nostrils. You let the silence settle into your ears until you hear your heart beat. Then another sound, a faint creak. You turn sharply. A tree branch bends under fresh snow, releasing a soft groan against the windless air. The sound echoes in your mind longer than it lasts in the world. You take it as a sign that the forest edge must be near. Trees complain when weighed down, open plains do not. Guided by sound more than sight, you angle toward the noise. Within minutes, the faint shapes of trees reappear through the dimness. You walk faster, grateful for the return of landmarks. The ground becomes uneven again, punctuated by roots and frost-hardened clumps. Your boots catch once on a hidden branch and you stumble but catch yourself. When you finally reach the tree line, you touch the nearest trunk in relief. The bark is cold but textured, grounding you. Trees cannot guide you completely, but they give you reference points, a way to measure progress. You lean your forehead against the bark for a moment, breathing slowly. The snow continues falling, but you no longer feel lost. Not entirely. You still have movement, you still have direction, and with careful attention, you may yet find the trail before the storm buries it completely. You lift your head, take one steadying breath, and step forward into the forest again, determined to follow whatever hints the world offers next. You push deeper into the forest, grateful for the familiar shapes of trunks and branches guiding your steps. The trees stand like quiet sentinels, their limbs heavy with new snow. Every time you brush past a branch, a soft cascade falls onto your shoulders, dusting your coat with cold powder. The air beneath the canopy feels slightly warmer than the open plain, or perhaps simply less exposed. You breathe more easily here, each inhale softened by the comforting scent of pine. As you walk, the snowfall begins to slow thick flakes, drifting lazily instead of swirling in frantic spirals. The hush becomes peaceful, almost contemplative. Your boots move rhythmically, crunching through drifts in a way that soothes your nerves. Fatigue creeps into your muscles, heavy and insistent. You've been awake for too long, your mind stretched thin by cold and caution. You long for sleep, real sleep, the kind that settles into your bones, instead of brushing shallowly across your thoughts. But sleeping in a storm demands its own rituals, and you know any bed you choose tonight must be chosen with care. You pause beside a wide spruce and sit at its base, letting your back sink into the thick trunk. The bark is firm and textured, pressing lightly through your coat. As your eyes grow heavy, your mind begins to drift not into dreams, but into that hazy space just before sleep where sounds distort and thoughts unravel gently. You close your eyes briefly, allowing the dim world to blur. The snow continues its quiet descent, softening the forest into a muted, dreamlike realm. You hear the faint rustle of distant branches, a low murmur of wind from somewhere beyond the hills. For a moment your thoughts slip into half-dreams of warm hearths, flickering candles, and the gentle hum of conversation. The kind of comfort that seems impossibly far from this frozen world. Frontier accounts written in cramped script often describe this exact mental drifting. Exhausted travellers wrapped in blankets or lying beneath wagons reported moments when the storm outside faded into a distant whisper, and thoughts dissolved into strange looping visions. Many believed these dreamlike moments helped them endure the cold, as if the mind created its own refuge when the body could not. You feel that now the world softening at the edges even before sleep truly takes hold. Your eyelids flutter open again. The forest looks different after that brief lapse, as though the trees have shifted slightly, or the snow has grown brighter. The fire you imagine at your feet does not exist, but you feel its phantom warmth for a heartbeat, before reality creeps back in. You rub your hands together, chasing the illusion away. You cannot fall fully asleep yet. You need a proper shelter first, something sturdier than the base of a spruce. You rise gently, shoulders stiff, and follow a narrow path between the trees. The snow muffles your steps, making you feel like you're gliding rather than walking. The forest is so quiet you almost expect to hear whispers from the branches. Instead, all you hear is the soft rhythm of flakes landing on your hat, and the muted groan of trees shifting under their burden. Ahead you spot a small natural alcove formed by two fallen logs leaning against a massive trunk. Snow has accumulated along the edges, leaving a hollow space in the centre, just large enough for you to lie in. It looks inviting, like a nest carved by winter itself. You kneel and inspect it, brushing away loose snow. The ground beneath is packed but not icy. You run your palm along the inner wall of one of the logs, feeling the fibrous texture beneath your glove. Settlers often took advantage of such natural formations, using them as windbreaks or shallow shelters when storms caught them unprepared. Many describe these spaces as unexpectedly comfortable, their low ceilings creating a sense of safety. As you test the hollow with your hands, your fingers catch on something unusual. A tiny carving barely larger than a fingernail etched into the bark. You brush it clean, revealing a small symbol, a crescent shape hovering above a simple circle. You pause, intrigued. Personal marks like these appear in a handful of old travel journals. Some families carved symbols on trees to mark camp spots. Others left small icons meant to bring luck or protection. Whether this carving served a practical purpose or a spiritual one is impossible to know, but you feel oddly reassured by it. You place your bedroll inside the hollow, smoothing it across the flattened snow. The space is snug, but the closeness promises warmth. You crawl in, partially testing how the logs block the cold air. The hollow air feels still protected from wind in all directions. As you prepare your little shelter, your mind wanders again to the experience of sleeping during a storm. Historical descriptions often mention the sound of canvas flapping overhead, or the sharp hiss of snow-pelting wagon covers. But the forest offers a different soundtrack. Here sleep arrives to the soft rhythmic patter of flakes settling on leaves and needles. Some accounts written by early naturalists describe these nights as strangely soothing, the forest's own kind of lullaby. Others, though, paint a more troubling picture. Certain travellers insisted that sleeping in deep forests during heavy storms could create unsettling dreams or even night terrors. They blame the constant cracking of ice-laden branches and the low groan of shifting trunks. Some modern experts dismiss this as superstition, while others argue that sleep deprivation and cold stress might have triggered such vivid nightmares. You consider both possibilities as you lie back, adjusting your coat around your ribs. The hollow darkens as you settle deeper. The logs form a shallow ceiling just inches above your face. Snow glows softly through the gaps, illuminating the small space with a faint silver tint. You breathe in the scent of wood sap and frozen earth. Your body begins to relax little by little, your limbs sinking into your bedding. You close your eyes again, letting your thoughts drift to softer places. Your breathing slows. The forest hums quietly around you. A flutter of snow lands near your head but does not startle you. Instead, it feels like a gentle reminder that you are safe for this moment, tucked into a winter cradle shaped by chance and instinct. Your mind slips once more toward dreamlike calm. You picture snow falling in slow motion, each flake glowing faintly before touching the ground. You hear distant voices that might be memories or imagination. The quiet deepens. Your heartbeat softens. The hollow embraces you like a tired friend. Though the storm continues beyond the trees for now, you're insulated from its temper. The logs hold steady. The snow settles above you like a soft blanket, and your body surrenders to the slow, drifting pull of rest, fading peacefully into the shelter shaped by the forest itself. You wake with a start, unsure what pulled you from sleep. For a moment you lie still inside the wooden alcove listening. The forest is hushed again, but this hush feels darker, heavier. You shift your legs and immediately sense the drop in temperature. The air has turned razor cold, slicing through the small gaps in your coat. Even your breath feels thin, barely warming your chest before vanishing into the frigid air. You push yourself upright, brushing loose snow from your shoulders. The world outside your little shelter glows faintly with the palest pre-dawn light, though the sky remains choked with clouds. Your instinct tells you something important before your thoughts catch up. The fire you used yesterday is long dead, and the woods are too damp to coax new flames without effort. This is one of those dreaded fireless nights every winter traveller learned to endure. You crawl out of the alcove and stretch stiff limbs feeling cold cling to you like a second skin. The air around you has a hollow quality, a sign of deep cold that presses sound downward. You rub your hands together vigorously, trying to bring some life into your fingers. Long before the era of modern winter gear travellers crossing the Rockies understood that nights without fire required a completely different strategy. Accounts from the period emphasise how people learned to warm themselves without flame-layering furs and wool with careful precision, tucking limbs close to the body and keeping blankets wrapped so tightly that only a sliver of nose peeked out. You mimic some of those motions now, drawing your coat around your ribs and folding your scarf so it traps your breath more effectively. You pace slowly across the clearing, stamping your boots to wake up your toes. The cold bites harder with each inhale. You feel it settle in your ears, in the delicate skin of your cheeks, and the joints of your knuckles. The sky above carries a bruised glow that hints at more snow to come. The forest watches you silently. In an attempt to warm your hands, you clasp them under your armpits. The gesture helps a little. You walk a few more steps, remembering an unusual trick shared among certain frontier families. They would fill their pockets with smooth stones held beneath their arms for a while, then shift those warm stones into their boots before resting. The stones did not stay warm long, but sometimes those extra minutes mattered. You glance at the ground and notice a few rounded rocks along a frozen creek bed. The idea tempts you, though you know the rocks will be brutally cold at first. You crouch and touch one experimentally. The stone is colder than the snow around it, and your fingertips recoil on instinct. You laugh softly under your breath, surprised at your own boldness. Still, you pick up two of the smaller ones, tucking them under your arms to let your body heat seep into them. It is a slow, uncomfortable process, but you can feel faint warmth beginning to gather in the stones. While you walk with the rocks nestled awkwardly beneath your coat, you reflect on how much winter survival depended on simple ideas, the kind that rarely appear in textbooks today. Some were clever, others were little more than desperate improvisation. Modern researchers who examined pioneer diaries disagree about how effective many of these techniques truly were. Some insist that such tactics saved countless lives. Others believe the methods offered more morale than actual heat. You hold both possibilities in your mind as you pace along the snowy creek. Eventually the stones grow warm enough to hold. You place one in each boot near your toes. The warmth is subtle but unmistakable, spreading through your feet with surprising tenderness. Relief loosens your shoulders. You breathe more easily. You stand still for a moment, letting the cold air settle around you. Without a fire, the forest feels sharper, the silence deeper. You hear every tiny sound, the faint creak of snow settling, the soft sigh of wind, brushing against frozen leaves, the subtle shift of your own coat as you move. You walk back to your alcove, knowing it will offer the best wind protection, even without flames. Before stepping inside, you check the snow-covered branches overhead. Ice weighs them down heavily, and occasional cracks echo through the forest as limbs adjust under the strain. You crawl into your shelter and settle onto your bedroll, pressing your hands beneath your thighs to warm them. The stones in your boots radiate the last remnants of heat, making your feet feel almost normal again. You adjust the collar of your coat, pulling it close around your throat. The air in the hollow feels cooler than last night, but still offers shelter from the worst of the wind. You lower your head, letting your breath warm the inside of your scarf. The cold works its way toward you, testing your resolve. Your eyelids flutter with fatigue. Your limbs grow heavy. As you settle deeper into the alcove, your thoughts turn inward. You think of travellers curling beneath wagons, pressing close to each other, relying on layers and instinct instead of fire. You imagine the long nights they endured, the quiet determination that carried them through the dark. You picture them lying awake like you listening to the storm's distant heartbeat. You curl your knees toward your chest, creating a tight, compact shape that holds warmth more efficiently. You tuck your hands into your coat sleeves. You feel your breathing slow again, each inhale soft and careful. Without fire, sleep comes differently. It arrives cautiously, like a visitor who tests the air before stepping forward. You close your eyes and sense the cold brushing lightly across your face, the stones keeping your toes alive, the forest holding its breath around you. The night deepens, the world grows still. Your body surrenders to the quiet, drifting toward a fragile but determined rest, wrapped in wool instinct and a stubborn will to keep going. You emerge from your cramped shelter with stiff limbs and a mind that feels half frozen, as if your thoughts were left outside overnight along with the snow. The morning has not warmed. In fact, it feels even colder now, a deeper, more personal kind of cold that seems to reach for you specifically. You take a few steps and immediately feel the unpleasant crunch of something rigid inside your boots. When you lift your foot, a chunk of ice shifts against your heel. Not snow, not slush, hard, packed cold. You sit on a fallen log and begin tugging the laces loose. Your breath fogs into the air, drifting sideways. Once the boot slides off, a cascade of snow spills out, revealing the problem. The inner lining has frozen into a stiff shell. You tap the boot lightly, and it gives off a dull wooden sound. You sigh, rubbing your forehead. This is what every winter traveller dreaded snow-packed boots at daybreak. People who crossed the Rockies centuries ago often wrote about mornings like this, describing how boots left near bedrolls became frozen sculptures by sunrise. The problem was not rare, nor was it dramatic. It was simply part of life. But that did not make it less miserable. The cold creeping into feet could ruin the next few hours, and frozen leather could rub skin raw. You flip the boot upside down and beat it gently against the log. More ice chips tumble out. The interior remains rigid, stubbornly holding its shape. You hold the boot against your chest, trying to warm it with body heat. The leather softens a little enough that you can flex the sides with your hands. Your fingers ache, but the feeling slowly returns. As you work, a peculiar frontier remedy comes to mind. Some seasoned mountain travellers swore by stuffing boots with handfuls of warm moss gathered from the sunny side of trees before bedtime. Moss supposedly held residual heat longer than cloth. Whether that was genuine wisdom or simply one family's tradition is difficult to pin down, but the idea feels oddly comforting. You glance at the nearest trunk where patches of moss cling in frozen green clumps, though none look remotely warm right now. With your fingers thawing, you reach into the boot and scrape out remaining frost. The inside feels like rough velvet made of ice. You lean closer to the small circle of warmth your breath creates, and exhale into the boot, letting warm air coat the stiff lining. It softens a little more. In the background of your thoughts, you recall discussions among researchers who study historical gear. Some emphasize how adaptable people became when dealing with frozen footwear, noting clever techniques like sleeping with boots tucked inside blankets, or placing them under a sleeping companion's legs. Others argue that many travellers simply endured the pain without sophisticated tricks, accepting freezing boots as unavoidable. You imagine both types of people trudging through the same snowfields, each relying on a mix of instinct, stubbornness, and luck. You switch to your other boot. It resists even more, clinging to your heel like a stubborn barnacle. When you finally peel it off, your toes feel strangely numb, almost ghost-like inside your sock. You wiggle them slowly, encouraging blood to return. A dull tingling spreads through your foot, uncomfortable but welcome. You hold both boots close to your stomach, letting your coat trap heat. It is not elegant, but it works. The leather softens inch by inch. The inner lining starts to feel pliable again. You test the flexibility with your thumbs, pressing gently until the material yields. A soft breeze moves across the clearing, stirring loose snow into swirling curls. The air tastes faintly metallic again, reminding you that another wave of cold may arrive soon. You work faster, knowing you cannot linger too long with bare feet in this weather. When the boots finally regain enough softness to wear, you slip them back on carefully. The warmth inside them is slight but noticeable. You stamp your feet a few times, feeling the ground's firmness through the soles. Better, still cold but manageable. You stand and stretch, letting your spine realign. The forest around you shivers with faint sounds. Snow falls from branches in soft plumes. The early light has a bluish tint, illuminating the clearing with a quiet, almost sacred calm. You take a moment to breathe it in. Even discomfort belongs to the rhythm of this landscape. Your toes flex inside the boots again. The tingling calms. You adjust your coat collar and tighten your scarf. A few flakes land gently on your shoulders, melting slowly as they warm against your fabric. You begin moving toward a stand of younger pines, their slender trunks forming narrow corridors. Walking helps. Your blood circulates faster, warming your legs first, then your feet. The world feels a bit less severe with each step. Your thoughts drift toward the people who once relied on similar winter mornings. You imagine them crouched by fires, rubbing stiff boots, blowing warm breath into frozen leather, or muttering to themselves as they pried stiff soles apart. Maybe they cursed the cold. Maybe they laughed at their own misery. Maybe they simply accepted the ritual, knowing that overcoming these small battles allowed them to face the bigger ones. The air shifts gently as you walk. The sky brightens by a small degree enough that you can distinguish individual flakes instead of seeing only a blur. The forest smells clean, crisp, and faintly resinous. Your boots finally feel flexible, almost normal beneath you. Each step grows easier. You feel better prepared for the day than you did an hour ago, even though nothing dramatic has changed. Sometimes surviving the mountains is not about conquering disasters, but handling small discomforts with patience. You brush a strand of hair from your face and inhale deeply. The cold stings your lungs, but it no longer overwhelms you. You feel grounded again, aware of your body, alert to the landscape, ready to continue. One step after another, you move through the quiet morning, your boots softening fully with each stride. Your breath rising in faint silver wisps and the world opening slowly before you in shades of grey and pale blue. You continue along the narrow corridor of young pines until the trail widens enough for the sky to reappear above you in a dim wash of grey. The morning has settled into a heavy cold, the sort that clings to your clothing like damp clay. Your feet ache in their recently thawed boots, and your fingers tingle with returning warmth. You move steadily, letting your breath fall into a slow rhythm until the forest thins and reveals a small clearing shaped like a cupped hand. Here the air carries a faint echo of movement. You pause listening, a soft crunch, then another. Not animal-like this time, more deliberate, human footsteps. Relief rises quietly in your chest. You walk toward the sound and soon you see them shallow prints fresh enough that snow has not yet begun to swallow them. Their spacing is even purposeful. Someone passed through recently, perhaps a traveller or possibly a small group. The prints lead toward a half-buried boulder that juts from the snow like the back of a great sleeping animal. You approach cautiously, and only when you round the boulder do you see what lies beyond a temporary resting spot marked by faint seating impressions in the snow, a few scattered twigs and the remnants of a watch post. The snow is disturbed as though someone paced in a tight circle for hours. It takes you a moment to recognize the pattern. This must have been a rotating night watch, the kind groups relied on during dangerous winter passages. People travelling the Rockies in earlier centuries often organised themselves into shifts on nights when storms howled or predators circled camps. Accounts mention how one person stood guard for a time, then woke the next, trading exhaustion for vigilance. Travellers learned early that the mountains rewarded alertness. Light sleepers survived. Heavy sleepers did not always. You kneel running your glove along the packed snow where someone once paced. The footprints create a looping path worn deeper at the edges. You imagine the watcher wrapped in a stiff coat stamping their feet to keep feeling in their toes, blowing warm breath into their hands, listening for every crack of ice or whisper of wind. Near the centre of the clearing you spot a curious mound. When you brush snow from its crest, a small stack of stones emerges arranged deliberately. Their shapes vary, but the placement is careful. You tilt your head. Some groups used cairns not just to mark paths, but to assign watch duties. The top stone was moved each time a new person took the shift, creating a silent record of who guarded when. Whether this specific stack served that purpose or something else entirely is impossible to know, but the idea lingers as you study it. Modern interpretations of these practices are mixed. Some analysts argue that travellers were strict about maintaining watches in winter, especially near mountain passes. Others believe that many families abandoned the practice out of sheer exhaustion, relying instead on luck and the natural caution of the wilderness itself. Kneeling here beside the footprints of someone who clearly stayed awake while others slept, you sense the truth sat somewhere between discipline and desperation. You rise slowly and study the space more carefully. Someone sat here, legs tucked beneath them, likely trying to stay awake despite the cold, pressing in from every direction. Another person must have curled in the hollow, nearby wrapped tightly in blankets or furs, trusting the watcher to alert them if danger approached. You walk to the edge of the clearing, where a narrow stand of aspens leans in a crooked line. Snow gathers on their white trunks, accentuating the scars etched by animals or wind. One trunk carries a shallow notch near your eye level, a small vertical cut that looks deliberate. You brush snow from it and run your finger along the mark. A simple tally, perhaps, one watcher indicating the end of a shift. Or a note to anyone passing through saying someone was here, someone stayed awake, someone tried. You linger a moment longer, feeling the emptiness of the watch circle. The cold presses lightly against your back. You imagine taking your place there, pacing slowly around the boulder while everyone else sleeps. The forest would sound louder. Every crack would matter. Every sigh of wind would tighten your chest. Your body responds instinctively to the thought. You straighten your shoulders, lift your chin. Your breath emerges in steady clouds. Even alone, you feel as if the clearing expects you to continue the ritual, to remain alert. But you cannot stay here. Not with daylight thinning and the cold rising again. You adjust your scarf and follow the faint trail the earlier travellers left behind. The prints lead away from the clearing toward a gentle slope edged with brush. As you walk, your thoughts linger on the concept of watchfulness. Not just in hindsight, but as a living practice. Travellers relied on each other. They trusted someone to listen when others rested. That trust kept camp safe, kept fires tended, kept wolves at bay. You move through the brush, sensing the echo of their vigilance in the steady rhythm of your own footsteps. The trail curves slightly, guiding you toward a cluster of tall firs. The air grows darker beneath their branches. Snow drifts accumulate in high mounds, softening the ground. You pause again and listen the way a watcher might. The forest breathes around you with quiet intention. A distant crack echoes through the trees. Snow falling from a limb, nothing threatening. You exhale, letting your shoulders relax. Your feet carry you farther, guided by the faint memory of the footprints behind you and the steady pull of the land ahead. You feel oddly connected to the unseen travellers who kept watch here. Their vigilance lingers in the air, subtle yet grounding. The rhythm of the watch circle stays with you as you walk deeper into the forest, the world narrowing to soft drifts, quiet trees, and the slow meditative sound of your own breath in the cold. You follow the line of firs until the forest thins once more. The land ahead slopes upward, a wide incline draped in white. The air grows strangely hushed again, and you sense a new kind of tension gathering in the snow-covered hills. The silence is not peaceful this time. It feels watchful, poised, as if something enormous is holding its breath just out of sight. You climb slowly, every step sinking into powder. The incline steepens. Your boots slide occasionally on crusted patches hidden beneath soft drifts. When you reach a rocky shelf halfway up the slope, you stop to catch your breath. The view surprises you. The valley below stretches in a serene sweep of white shadowed gently by the dim sky. But the stillness above you is different, thicker. A heaviness in the air hints that the mountain is not entirely asleep. You step closer to a large boulder brushing snow from its surface. The stone beneath is smooth, dark, and strangely warm compared to the surrounding air. You place your gloved hand against it and listen. The slope above you creaks faintly, a subtle shifting noise that prickles your spine. The sound is not wind, it is snow itself adjusting its weight. Travellers who crossed these mountains long ago wrote about moments exactly like this. They recalled nights spent lying awake beneath slopes where snowpack shifted restlessly, threatening to tumble without warning. The danger was real, and well-known avalanches on the Rocky Mountain passes were fearsome, unpredictable forces capable of burying entire camps in seconds. Yet despite the threat, many had no choice but to sleep within reach of them, praying for stillness until dawn. You crouch on the rocky shelf, breathing slowly. A soft, rolling murmur drifts from higher up like a long sigh exhaled by the mountain. It fades quickly, leaving only the whisper of falling flakes. Your chest tightens. Avalanches rarely announce themselves clearly. Sometimes they begin with nothing more than a single crack you may or may not hear. You study the slope carefully. The snow lies smooth, unbroken, gleaming with a faint bluish cast. A dark line of exposed rock juts near the top half, hidden beneath accumulating drifts. You tilt your head and watch the shadows. Nothing moves, not a flake out of place, but the mountain's quiet does not soothe you. A curious bit of mountain lore flickers through your mind. Some early guides believed that pressing an ear to the snow on suspect slopes allowed a person to hear faint internal groans, early hints of instability. Whether that method ever offered real warning is uncertain. You imagine those guides crouching just as you are now, one ear against the snow, listening for danger that might or might not reveal itself. Your fingers tap the stone absently. You glance down the slope to evaluate escape paths. If the snow broke free above you, you would have seconds at most. The idea chills you even more than the wind. The snowpack here is deep enough to swallow a full-grown elk. You try not to picture yourself beneath it. Researchers who study avalanche history sometimes debate how well early travellers understood the mechanics of these slides. Some maintain that settlers recognise subtle signs like hollow-sounding snow or abrupt overnight temperature shifts. Others argue that most people simply relied on luck crossing hazardous terrain without grasping the science. Standing on this slope, you can imagine both perspectives. The signs are subtle, perhaps too subtle for anyone without years of experience. Another soft murmur rolls across the slope, faint but unmistakable. You straighten quickly. Snowflakes drift lazily from a nearby fir onto your shoulders, but your mind is no longer on the gentle fall. You stare upward again, waiting, listening. The mountain remains at rest. You force yourself to breathe deeply. The cold sharpens the air in your lungs. You remind yourself that snowpack often settles harmlessly, adjusting its weight without giving way. Not every sound is a warning. But you cannot ignore the unease crawling along your arms. You move off the rocky shelf and angle toward a cluster of anchored pines further down the slope. Trees rooted deeply into a hillside can sometimes act as barriers, holding back smaller slides. You tread lightly, choosing paths where the snow seems firmest. As you walk, your ears remain tuned for the faintest shift or crack. Halfway to the trees, you hear it, a low rumble, almost too soft to notice. Then silence again. You freeze in place. The rumble had no echo, no direction. It could have been the deep settling of snow far away, or it could have been something much closer. Your heart thuds loudly enough that you feel it in your throat. Seconds pass, nothing moves. You step again, slower, testing each patch of snow before committing your weight. When you reach the line of pines, you place your hand on the nearest trunk and let out a breath you did not realize you were holding. The bark is rough beneath your glove, a welcome contrast to the brittle snow. Sheltered slightly by the trees, you crouch low and scan the landscape. The slope above remains still. The valley below looks peaceful. Only your nerves continue to tremble like a plucked string. You know you cannot stay on this hillside. Avalanches can strike hours after the first warning sounds, or they may never strike at all. You must descend carefully, steadily, without losing balance. As you begin downward, the mountain offers no more whispers. Just the soft crunch of your boots and the quiet fall of flakes. The danger remains behind you, invisible but real, as you move towards safer ground. At the bottom of the slope, you turn once more and look upward. The snow is flawless, still, completely undisturbed. You almost doubt your own ears. Almost. You leave the unstable slope behind and descend into a gentler valley, where the snow lies deep but calm, cushioned by a ring of tall evergreens. The quiet here feels different from the tense hush of the hillside. This silence is softer, almost tender, as if the forest is trying to comfort you after the uneasy climb. You draw a long breath. The air still bites, but the harsh metallic sting of higher elevation has mellowed into something more breathable. As you move forward, your foot catches on a buried branch and you steady yourself with a tired laugh. The fatigue settling into your bones feels older than the morning itself, a slow heaviness born from too many cold hours and too little true rest. You adjust your scarf, rub your hands together and push deeper into the valley. Then you hear it, a faint uneven whimper carried on the air. Not an animal cry, something too fragile. You strain to listen. The sound returns muffled, trembling. You turn sharply toward a cluster of tightly packed firs. Snow hangs in thick drapes from their branches, but beneath them lies a shallow indentation, as if someone has pressed into the snow repeatedly. You approach slowly, and as you near the trees, the shape becomes clear. A small figure curled into a tight ball wrapped in a threadbare blanket that is stiff with frost. A child. Their tiny shoulders quiver as they draw their knees close to their chest. You kneel without hesitation, brushing snow gently from the blanket. A weak, frightened gaze meets yours. In accounts passed down by families who crossed these mountains long ago, children were often the most vulnerable during winter treks. Their bodies cooled faster, their stamina faltered sooner, and their blankets rarely block the cold as effectively as adult coats. Travellers wrote about the challenge of keeping little ones warm when storms howled through camps. Some families created elaborate nests of furs clothing and canvas, burying their children inside layers of makeshift insulation. Others simply held their young close through the night, letting shared warmth decide the outcome. You touch the child's shoulder lightly. Their skin feels like chilled porcelain beneath your glove. You whisper reassurance, your voice soft enough not to startle them. Their eyes shift toward you, frightened but hopeful. You shrug off your coat and drape it around the child, letting your body heat seep into the thick wool. The loss of your own warmth strikes immediately, but the relief on the child's face steadies you. You help them sit up, brushing loose snow from their hair. Their breath forms tiny clouds that fade quickly in the cold. You scan the area for signs of others. Tracks appear faintly in the snow, leading away from the firs toward the valley's eastern edge. Perhaps a group passed through and became separated. It would not be unusual. Winter storms often scattered travellers, leaving families scrambling to find each other. Some journals describe desperate searches by lantern-light parents, calling for their children over the wind's roar. You lift the child, gently supporting their weight as you guide them closer to the shelter beneath the firs. The trees form a protective canopy overhead, catching flakes before they reach the ground. You settle the child against one of the thicker trunks and inspect the blanket they carry. The fabric is old, thin and damp. It needs to dry or be replaced. A peculiar bit of frontier practicality comes to mind. Some families carried loose wool tufts in small bags ready to stuff into sleeves pockets or blankets whenever warmth ran low. The wool acted as emergency insulation, trapping precious heat. You do not have wool tufts, but you do have spare socks in your pack. Thick ones. You pull them out and tuck them around the child's sides, focusing on their torso where heat escapes fastest. The child's shivering slows. Their breathing steadies. You feel your own temperature dropping, but you push the thought aside. You rub their arms through the blanket, coaxing circulation back to their small hands. In modern studies of cold weather travel, some experts disagree about the most effective way historical groups kept children warm. Certain researchers believe layering was the key, while others argue that direct body contact from adults provided the bulk of protection. Looking at the fragile child in your arms, now you understand why those opinions differ. Necessity shaped choices differently for every group. The child's gaze softens as they realize you mean no harm. They lean toward you, small fingers gripping the edge of your coat. You feel their tremors lessen. The relief that washes over you is subtle but profound. You reach into your pack again and retrieve a small piece of hardtack. The child accepts it with numb fingers and bites tentatively. Crumbs cling to their lips. You smile and offer a sip of your water warmed slightly by your body heat. They drink slowly, swallowing carefully. The fir branches rustle gently above you. Snow slips from them in small clumps, landing softly around your feet. The valley feels protective now, embracing both of you in its quiet stillness. You adjust the coat around the child's shoulders again, making sure no cold air seeps inside. Your own shivers begin faint but noticeable. You know you cannot stay here long. The cold will seep too deeply. You must move, find more shelter. Perhaps reunite the child with whoever left those faded tracks. You lift the child, carefully feeling their weight settle against your chest. Their tiny hands clutch your collar. The warmth of their breath presses against your neck, a small but welcome comfort. You stand adjusting your pack with one hand while supporting the child with the other. Snowflakes drift around you in gentle spirals. The sky hangs low, but the valley does not feel hostile anymore. You take one step forward, then another, following the faint trail etched into the snow. You head toward the eastern edge of the clearing, the child tucked safely against your coat, the forest guiding your path with a quiet that feels purposeful rather than empty. With each step you sense the weight of responsibility, but also a quiet flame of determination. The mountains may be cold, but you are not alone now, and that changes everything. You make your way through the trees with the child bundled securely against your chest, your coat wrapped around their small shoulders. Their breathing has steadied, but each step you take feels heavier, as if the cold is trying to cling to your legs and slow you down. The world beyond the trees glows faintly, washed in shades of white and pale grey. A soft haze hangs over the valley. Snow still falls in delicate strands, but the storm has eased enough that you can see farther than before. When you emerge from the firs, the landscape widens into a quiet clearing framed by dense pine. The sight that greets you fills your senses at once, a thin ribbon of smoke, drifting upward from a ring of stones half buried in snow, and the unmistakable sweet resin scent of pine wood that has burned very recently. The fragrance hangs in the air like a memory. Someone kept a fire here not long ago. You kneel beside the stone ring, careful not to shift the child too roughly. The ashes inside are faintly warm beneath a crust of fresh snow. You brush the surface gently with gloved fingers and inhale. The scent of pine smoke clings to the ground, earthy and rich with sap. Travellers on these mountains often relied on pitchy pine because it burned brighter and longer than many other woods found at high altitudes. The glowing aroma had become an unofficial emblem of winter camps, drifting through ravines and clinging to coats long after the flames died. You pull your scarf down to breathe more fully, letting the resin sweetness seep into your nose. For a moment the smell is almost intoxicating, a reminder of nights warmed by sturdy fires and shared meals. You can almost imagine the people who stood here before you, warming their hands, rubbing their boots, exchanging tired remarks about the relentless cold. A faint crackle from a nearby log startles you back to the present. Snow shifts on a fallen pine trunk, creating a tiny plume of powder. The child stirs, murmuring something muffled by your coat. You rub their back gently, whispering reassurance you hope they understand. You move around the clearing, searching for more clues. Shallow impressions near the fire ring suggest several people sat here in a loose circle. One deeper indentation looks like someone knelt or crouched for a long time, perhaps tending the flames. As you study the shapes, a small splash of colour catches your eye. Half buried beside the stones lies a charred scrap of cloth bright red beneath the soot. You pick it up and turn it in your hand. A strip torn from a scarf, perhaps. Some groups marked their campsites with bright cloth so stragglers could find them. Whether this scrap served that purpose or simply burned accidentally is impossible to say, but the colour alone gives you hope. A party large enough to use fire and markings might still be nearby. You tuck the scrap into your pack and stand shifting the child's weight. Their eyes blink open, briefly heavy with exhaustion. You speak softly to them, but your words disappear into the cold before reaching your own ears. As you scan the clearing again, you recall that different accounts from winter travellers describe pine smoke as both a comfort and a hazard. Some described the warmth as life-saving, praising its ability to dry soaked wool quickly. Others mentioned how the scent clung so heavily to clothing that predators could track it more easily. Even among experts today, interpretations vary. Some believe the pine-rich aroma served as an inadvertent beacon to nearby groups. Others see it as an unavoidable byproduct of using the only burnable wood available. You lift your face slightly and take another deep breath. The lingering smoke seems to drift upward more on one side of the clearing than the other. The breeze barely moves, yet the smell feels stronger toward the north. You turn in that direction, feeling something like a tug, a quiet pull toward whatever group may have left this campsite behind. Without a fire of your own to warm the child, you must find shelter or companionship soon. You adjust your grip, pressing the small body against your ribs. The warmth you provide is limited but steady. Your own temperature drops in exchange, but you ignore the chill creeping around your spine. Beyond the clearing lies a gentle rise covered in scattered pines. The trees there grow taller, sturdier, their branches bristling with tufts of fresh snow. You head toward them, following your instinct in the faint drift of pine smoke. As you climb the slight incline, the scent grows richer again, floating on the still air in small bursts. Not fresh, but not old either. Someone passed through here recently. You tread carefully, scanning for footprints, and eventually you see them shallow tracks heading toward a narrow ravine. Relief warms your chest. You follow the trail slowly, careful not to slip while carrying the child. The ravine walls rise on either side, sheltered from the wind. Snow lies deep but still. The air smells strongly of resin here, as if the walls themselves hold the ghost of a fire that once burned nearby. You pause at a bend in the ravine, adjusting the child in your arms so you can free one hand. You run your glove along the stone wall. The rock is cold, but it carries a faint smoky scent, as though wind pushed campfire air into this sheltered nook sometime during the night. The child's eyelids flutter again. You press your cheek to their head, feeling the small warmth against your skin. You whisper gently that you are close to others, that the night will be easier soon, even if the words are more for you than for them. When you look up again, you spot a shape ahead, a small bundle of pine branches arranged neatly at the base of a fir. Beside it lies an imprint in the snow, the outline of someone resting briefly, perhaps a parent waiting, scanning the ravine for a missing child. Your heart tightens. You step forward carefully, the scent of pine smoke swirling faintly around you. Every breath steadies your determination. The mountains may be cold and unpredictable, but traces of warmth remain. You follow them steady and deliberate deeper into the ravine, carrying the child and the lingering fragrance of pine like a quiet promise. The day is far from over, but for the first time in hours, a fragile hope warms the air around you. You continue along the ravine with slow measured steps, the child held securely against your chest. Snowflakes drift gently around you, landing on the edge of your coat and melting into tiny dark spots. As you walk, the slope widens and the trees spread farther apart, revealing an open shelf of land glazed in pale morning light. The cold seems sharper here, less filtered by the shelter of the ravine, and the air stings your cheeks as though reminding you how vulnerable fabric and flesh can be in such weather. You reach a small rise and pause to adjust the child's blanket. The fabric has stiffened again where frost crept along the outer folds. You brush away the ice gently, but the sight reminds you of something else, the way bedding freezes overnight in winter storms. When pioneers described mornings in the Rockies, many wrote about waking to blankets so stiff with frost They could stand upright on their own. It was not rare, it was not dramatic, it was simply winter asserting itself. Your own bedroll, still bundled on your pack, holds the unmistakable crunch of frozen fabric. You lower yourself to a log half buried in snow and unroll it just enough to inspect the damage. A thin sheet of ice clings to the surface like a brittle glaze. When you flex the fabric, it crackles loudly, sending a spray of crystals into the air. You lean closer and blow warm breath onto one corner. The frost melts slowly, leaving a darker, damp patch. Not ideal. You know that if you were planning to sleep soon, the moisture would be disastrous. But for now you merely need the roll to be pliable enough to use later. You rub it briskly with your palm, warming the surface until the stiffness softens slightly. Even that small improvement feels like a victory in this cold. There was a trick some frontier families used to keep blankets from freezing too hard overnight, layering hides or heavy cloth on top of the bedding so the upper materials absorbed the frost, while the lower layers remained flexible. You smile wryly at the memory, wishing you had a buffalo hide tucked in your pack. Instead, you reach into your coat and pull out an extra shirt you have kept mostly dry. You wrap it loosely around part of the roll, hoping it will act as a buffer against the frost that continues to fall. The child shifts, letting out a soft, sleepy sound. You run your hand gently along their back. Their heat against your chest reassures you, even as you feel the cold trying to reclaim the edges of your coat. You stand again, testing your legs. They protest at first, stiff from tension and carrying weight for so long, but they obey. As you press onward, you think of how different accounts interpret the freezing of bedding. Some writers claim settlers expected it, and barely mentioned it in letters, treating it like a morning chore, no more surprising than shaking snow from one's boots. Others describe the shock of waking encased in rigid blankets as one of winter's cruelest indignities. Modern historians still offer differing interpretations, unsure whether the danger of frozen bedding has been exaggerated or underplayed over time. You imagine both reactions being true depending on the sleeper's luck and the storm's temper. You stop beneath a thick pine whose branches droop heavily with snow. Its shelter feels almost cavernous beneath the weight of the limbs, and the ground here is soft with fallen needles. You set the child down carefully against the trunk, letting them rest while you tend to your gear. You hold the bedroll in your hands, examining the surface for cracks. Tiny fissures of ice lace the outer layer, catching the pale light like thin threads of glass. You gently flex the fabric again. It bends now without snapping. Better. A sudden sound breaks the quiet. A soft plop as a mound of snow drops from a branch above and lands beside you. The child stirs but does not fully wake. You brush the snow aside and return your attention to the roll. A faint memory surfaces, an unusual practice mentioned in a long-forgotten family diary. The writer describes sprinkling a handful of ash over blankets at night to reduce the frost that formed by morning. The ash, they claimed, attracted moisture away from the bedding. Whether this technique ever truly worked is unclear, and you certainly have no ash to spare now, but the thought lingers like a tiny spark of ingenuity. You lift the bedroll onto your shoulder and tuck the end securely against your pack. The fabric still crunches slightly, but the worst of the rigidity has eased. You gather the child again, wrapping your coat around them more snugly. The clearing opens ahead of you. The air glitters faintly as sunlight begins to peek through the thinning clouds. The warmth is minimal, but your spirits lift at the sight of the sky brightening. Snowflakes sparkle like drifting crystals. You take a few moments to let the child watch the falling flakes. Their small eyes widen, just slightly captivated despite their exhaustion. You whisper something calm and soft, feeling momentarily at peace in the fragile stillness. You shift your pack, tighten the straps and press onward across the clearing. Each step leaves a clear boot print in the snow, an image that feels comforting after the storm erased so many of your earlier tracks. The landscape may still be harsh, but here at least the ground acknowledges your presence. The scent of pine smoke lingers faintly behind you, fading with every step. Ahead lies only trees, snow, and the faint rhythm of your breathing. But your bedding is no longer a rigid slab. The child rests warmer in your arms, and the day carries a small glimmer of hope. You walk on the crunch of frost-softened fabric, and the hush of falling snow weaving together into a quiet cadence that feels steady, patient, and determined. You move through the thinning pines with the child still bundled securely in your arms, your footsteps slow and deliberate as the snow deepens again. A faint hush settles around you, not the soft quiet of falling flakes, but something sharper, a silence that feels stretched tight like a hidden wire. You pause, shifting your weight carefully. The air holds its breath. Then, far off in the distance, a long, low howl threads through the trees. Not a coyote this time. The sound is deeper, fuller, with a resonance that vibrates faintly in your ribs. You feel the child stir against your chest as the sound fades, and another answers it closer, much closer. You draw in a steady breath. Wolves. You turn slowly in place, scanning the tree line. The snow muffles everything, so their movement, if they are moving at all, stays hidden. But you can sense their presence in the way the forest stiffens, the way even the branches seem to hold still. Long ago, travellers crossing the Rockies kept careful notes about encounters with wolves in winter. Many entries described wolves as curious but cautious, more interested in scavenging leftovers from camps than confronting people. Those accounts often painted wolves as night watchers lingering at the edges of firelight, their eyes glowing like small lanterns. You listen to the quiet between howls, trying to decide whether you should expect curiosity today or hunger. A sudden crunch of snow to your right snaps your attention sharply in that direction. You pivot, adjusting your stance so the child is shielded behind your shoulder. For a moment nothing moves. The trees remain still, their branches hanging heavy with frost. But then a shadow shifts just slightly between two trunks, a fleeting shape barely darker than the surrounding dimness. Your pulse jumps, but you breathe deeply, forcing the tension from your shoulders. Wolves rarely attacked groups, and even a lone traveller often remained safe if they projected confidence. One trick that circulated among certain frontier families involved raising both arms slowly to appear larger, or holding a coat open like makeshift wings. You cannot spare your coat now, but you straighten your posture, lifting your chin as you step into a more commanding stance. You shuffle backward toward a cluster of tightly grown spruce, knowing the needles will act as a natural barrier. Wolves hesitate to push through dense underbrush. The scent of broken twigs tends to make them wary. You slide your boots across the snow, carefully avoiding sudden moves that might draw unwanted attention. The child stirs again, letting out a soft, confused sound. You whisper gently into their ear that everything is all right, though the words are meant as much for yourself as for them. Another howl rolls across the valley, rising and falling like a mournful song. This one comes from higher ground to your left. The call is steady, measured, almost like a roll call. You swallow hard. Packs often spread out in winter, sweeping an area in coordinated arcs. Whether they interpret you as a threat or merely an interesting interruption, you cannot know. People who study the old trail records often disagree about how dangerous wolves truly were to westbound travellers. Some argue the risks were minimal, insisting most wolf encounters ended with nothing more than exchanged stares. Others suggest that scarcity during harsh winters may have driven wolves closer to vulnerable camps than the journals admit. Listening to the layered howls, now you can understand why opinions diverge so sharply. The experience feels both eerie and undeniably grounded in reality. You reach the cluster of spruces and slip carefully behind the closest trunk. The needles are thick, brushing your coat with cool, resin-scented strokes. You steady yourself and listen again. The forest remains quiet except for the soft padding of snowflakes falling on needles and the faint echo of footsteps you cannot quite locate. You adjust your grip on the child and slowly crouch, letting the spruce limbs curtain around you. A flicker of movement reappears in the distance. A sleek grey form steps lightly from behind a tree, pausing to sniff the air. Its fur blends almost perfectly with the storm-muted world. Its eyes reflect the dim light in pale glints. It stands still for several seconds, studying the clearing as though reading a map only it understands. Then it turns its head slightly, ears flicking forward. You hold your breath. Another wolf moves behind it, just a blur of motion, then disappears into the thick pines. The first wolf glances back in the same direction, then trots silently after it, leaving only paw prints and a soft sweep of disturbed snow behind. The clearing empties again, the hush returns. You remain still for a long moment, listening for confirmation that the pack has moved on. The child presses their cold nose into your collar, and you smile faintly, though your pulse still flickers unevenly. When the silence finally feels real, you stand slowly and step away from the spruce shelter. The air feels different now, as though the forest itself has exhaled. You glance at the ground, studying the wolf tracks. They cross the clearing in a loose arc, not closing in, simply passing through. A reminder that winter belongs to many creatures, not just to those who walk upright. You whisper to the child that the wolves have gone, and their fingers tighten briefly in your coat as if they understand. You take a moment to reorient yourself. The faint trail you followed earlier still leads toward a distant slope. You touch your scarf to make sure it covers your mouth again, then adjust the child's blanket, tucking the edges securely beneath your arm. You step forward into the open space, your boots crunching softly. The wind picks up swirling snow in slow spirals that dance around your legs. The forest feels alive again, but not hostile, just aware. You continue across the clearing, keenly attuned to every sound and shift in light. The wolves are gone. The danger for now has passed. All that remains is the quiet snow beneath your feet, the sheltering trees ahead, and the warm little weight in your arms guiding your steps forward through the winter world. You leave the clearing behind and enter a stretch of forest where the trees grow farther apart, their shadows stretching long and pale across the snow. The sky is dimmed again, the light thinning until the world becomes a muted blur of grey and silver. As you step deeper into this muted world, you realize how quickly the darkness is gathering. The sun may still be above the clouds, but its warmth and brightness cannot reach you here. Night is arriving in a slow, inevitable drift. You take another step and your boot sinks quietly into the snow. The child's head rests against your shoulder now, their breath warm against your neck. You adjust your scarf, making sure it shields your mouth before you inhale again. The air feels sharper than before, carrying hints of the coming night. A moonless night by the look of the sky. Thick clouds blot out even the faintest glow. The forest deepens into shadow. The path ahead fades into an indistinct blur. You narrow your eyes, trying to make sense of the shapes around you. Snowdrifts mound up unpredictably, forming soft dunes that blend seamlessly with fallen logs and hidden rocks. You feel the old familiar tension of night travel settling across your shoulders. People who crossed the Rockies in the cold months often spoke of nights like this, nights where the darkness came down in heavy curtains, swallowing landmarks and erasing sense of direction. Without moonlight, travellers relied on their bodies more than their eyes. They learned to read the slightest tilt of the land underfoot, the faint pull of cold air that drifted downhill at dusk, and the shifting feel of snow on sloped ground. You test the incline beneath your boots, now feeling it rise gently on one side, fall a little on the other. A map written not on paper, but beneath your soles. You move forward carefully, letting your steps tell you what your eyes cannot. A dry branch cracks under your foot, the sound echoing softly in the hush. The child stirs again, small hands tightening around your coat. You whisper something calm and quiet, words you barely hear yourself. The darkness thickens further, and soon you can only make out silhouettes, the faint shape of a tree trunk, the curve of a drift, the ghostly shimmer of frost along the edges of your own sleeves. A night like this tests more than endurance. It tests trust. Trust in instinct, trust in touch, trust in the rhythm of your own breathing. A memory slips through your thoughts, something from an old winter traveller's journal you once read. The writer described how on moonless nights they reached out to brush the bark of trees as they walked, letting texture guide them when sight failed. Smooth meant aspen, rough meant fir, coarse and grooved meant ponderosa. The differences told them roughly where they stood. You stretch your free hand out and touch the nearest trunk. The bark is ridged with deep grooves rough under your glove. A tall pine likely. Your fingers follow the pattern, briefly grounding you in the present moment. Far above the branches shift slightly, releasing a whisper of snow that drifts down onto your head and shoulders. You blink the flakes away as they melt on your eyelashes. The night presses in further, turning the world into a tunnel of indistinct shapes. Despite the darkness, you catch a faint glimmer to your left. Not light exactly, but a slight opening where shadows thin. You turn in that direction, letting your boots guide you. The land dips gently there, and you sense open space through the dense trees. You follow the sensation. While descending the shallow slope, you recall an unusual frontier belief some travellers insisted that the forest itself changed its sound on truly dark nights. They claim the trees hum differently, or that the snow absorbed footsteps more deeply. Whether it was a real phenomenon or simply the mind sharpening in the absence of light, no one can say with certainty. As you listen now, you hear a faint hush, as though the world's edges have gone soft. Scholars who've studied early travel accounts still offer conflicting interpretations of navigation in nights like this. A few assert that pioneers had well-honed methods passed from family to family for reading terrain by touch alone. Others counter that these stories have been embellished, insisting that most night travel was clumsy, risky, and guided as much by luck as skill. Standing in the near darkness now, your hand brushing tree bark, your boots, feeling for dips in the ground, you suspect both ideas hold fragments of truth. You descend the slope until the tree's thin enough for a faint breeze to touch your face. The air here feels open, less trapped under branches. Your eyes adjust just enough to pick out a long flat patch of snow ahead, a natural corridor stretching between two rows of dark pines. The path is narrower than it first appeared, but clear enough to follow. You shift the child in your arms, careful not to jostle them. Their breath brushes your collar in steady puffs. The corridor guides you gently through the darkness, the snow underfoot firmer than before, packed by wind rather than footsteps. You slide one hand along a pine trunk now, and then steadying yourself, letting texture confirm you have not wandered off into unseen danger. Gradually you notice your breathing easing again. The rhythm of your step steadies. The corridor feels less like a trap and more like a passage, a quiet tunnel carved by winter's hand. You walk until the trees open slightly into a hollow where the snow glows faintly with reflected skylight. The darkness is still heavy but not absolute. You can finally see the outline of your own shadow, faint and wavering. You stop for a moment, inhaling deeply, savouring the slight expansion of space around you. The night is still black, the forest still hushed, but you have found your way through its heart without light. A small triumph, but meaningful. You adjust your grip on the child, their weight familiar now. Their breath warms your neck, reminding you why you must keep moving. You step forward again, feeling more confident with each stride through the moonless world. The dark no longer hides your path completely. It simply shapes it in quieter, subtler ways. And you follow. You stand in the pale hollow for several moments, letting the faint grey glow settle into your eyes. The child shifts softly in your arms, head resting on your collar, breath warming your skin in slow, whispery pulses. For a moment the quiet feels almost gentle, but then you notice something strange in the air, a muted pressure, a thickening, the kind of stillness that feels too complete. You tilt your head upward. The clouds swirl densely, swallowing any hint of sky. The snow begins falling again, but this time the flakes drift downward in heavy, soundless curtains. The world muffles under them, the silence deepening until it feels padded, stuffed, almost smothered. A blizzard is forming. Not the frantic, wind-whipped kind you battled earlier, but a slow, consuming one that rearranges time itself. You begin walking toward the far edge of the hollow, but the snow thickens so quickly that within a dozen steps the trees blur. Their outlines fade, smearing into the white like ink bleeding through cloth. You stop abruptly. It is impossible to tell where the hillside ends or where the path ahead begins. Everything merges into a soft, drifting haze. This kind of storm is the one winter travellers most dreaded. Over the centuries, people wrote about being trapped in blizzards that fell without wind, burying their camps in relentless layers of silence. These storms did not rage so much as they smothered erasing trails and turning the world into a shapeless expanse. Many diaries mention how time seemed to dissolve inside such storms, making hours feel like minutes, and minutes feel like entire evenings. You step carefully, testing the snow with your boot. It swallows half your shin instantly. The cold creeps up your leg in a slow, steady climb. You tighten your hold on the child and reach out blindly, hoping to find the trunk of a tree. Instead, your hand passes through empty air. The trees that ring the hollow have vanished behind drifting white. Your breathing speeds for a moment. You steady it, deliberately exhaling through your scarf. The air that returns through the wool tastes damp and faintly sweet, filled with the clean scent of snow. You take one small step forward, keeping your body low. The world feels buoyant and heavy at the same time, like you're walking through thick fog made of frozen feathers. The child presses close to your chest, instinctively sensing the change in the air. A memory rises unbidden from something you once read. Travelers caught in whiteout conditions sometimes closed their eyes intentionally, because the visual confusion made them stumble. Instead, they relied on sound touch and the faint slope of the ground to guide them. With vision unreliable, the body becomes the map. You close your eyes now, just briefly, and feel the land under your feet. There is a slight downward pull to your right. Cold air tends to settle in dips, so you avoid stepping that way. You angle left instead, where the ground feels firmer. You extend your free hand, sweeping it gently through the air until your fingertips brush something solid. Bark. You open your eyes, seeing nothing but white, yet your hand knows the truth. You press your palm against the tree, its roughness reassuring. Snow collects on top of your hat, heavy enough to make the brim sag. You shake it off and lean your shoulder gently into the trunk. Under the muffled hush of the storm, you detect a faint, steady rhythm nearby. Snow sliding down branches, landing in soft thuds. The child's breathing. Your own heartbeat. The world shrinks to these sounds. It is impossible to see far, so you keep one hand on the tree as you move. Slowly, cautiously, you follow the trunk downward to its roots. You feel the shape of the land, noting where the snow gathers and where it thins. You step sideways to the next tree, repeating the motion. Tree to tree, touch guiding where sight fails. You're reminded of an old mountain tale describing how some snowbound travelers counted trees aloud to maintain a sense of progression, using each trunk as a marker of distance. Whether that method truly prevented panic or simply gave people something to focus on is uncertain. Still, as you move from one tree to the next, you find yourself quietly numbering them in your mind. 1, 2, 3. The storm grows thicker. Your eyelashes collect frost. The child's blanket stiffens again along its edges. The cold presses insistently against your coat, creeping through seams with patient fingers. You shift the child higher against your chest, sharing your warmth as best you can. The world narrows even further. Sound drops away until you hear almost nothing. Not wind, not branches, not even the whisper of falling snow. Just stillness. Heavy. Unbroken. This is the blizzard's long silence, the kind that confuses even experienced travelers. In old letters, some people described this silence as peaceful, while others called it unnerving, claiming it made them lose track of reality. Modern interpretations vary as well. Some view the quiet as a moment of calm within chaos, while others believe it reflects atmospheric conditions that distort the usual cues of time and orientation. You squeeze the child's shoulder gently and continue moving. Tree to tree. Touch, step, breathe. Touch, step, breathe. The pattern becomes a lifeline, anchoring your mind against the storm's strange, timeless drift. Eventually your hand brushes against a trunk thicker than the others, a massive pine. You lean into it, feeling the deep grooves in its bark, the grounding solidity of its presence. Snow weights the branches above, but the tree feels strong, rooted deeply in the frozen earth. You slide down until you sit with your back against it, pulling the child close. The blizzard presses around you like a muffled cocoon. Time grows soft again, stretching and folding without clear boundaries. You do not know whether minutes or hours are passing. The silence makes all moments feel the same. You close your eyes, letting the child's breathing guide your own. The storm blankets the world, but beneath this ancient tree you feel a fragile shelter. Not warm, not comfortable, but steady. In the deep, smothered quiet of the blizzard, you wait for the mountain to loosen its grip and return your sense of direction when it chooses. You sit beneath the massive pine until the storm's pressure eases enough for the world to regain edges. The silence lifts slowly like a heavy curtain being drawn back by an unseen hand. Sound returns in small fragments, a distant crack of settling snow, the soft sigh of branches bending, the child's quiet breathing near your collar. You blink slowly, letting your vision adjust to the faint grey glow that has seeped back into the air. The blizzard is not gone, but it has loosened its grip. You rise cautiously, shifting the child's weight so your arms can bear it more comfortably. Your limbs ache with the stiffness of waiting too long in one position, but movement warms you in small, promising pulses. Snow clings to the folds of your coat as you step away from the tree and scan the forest floor for any sign of direction. A glint catches your eye near the base of a fallen log. You crouch, brushing aside the snow with your knuckles. A scrap of torn canvas peeks out, pale and stiff with frost. You tug gently, freeing a small piece of cloth stamped with faint stitching. The threading is the kind often used in makeshift tents or pack covers, common among overland groups who needed quick repairs on the trail. Seeing it here suggests someone struggled with equipment recently, perhaps in the same storm that trapped you. The discovery reminds you of something practical many frontier travellers wrote about in their letters. They rarely let fabric go to waste. Torn canvas was patched repeatedly and used to repair tents, mend clothes, or reinforce boots. You run your thumb along the stitching, imagining someone kneeling in the snow last night, lantern light flickering across their hands as they work to keep the wind from slicing into their shelter. When you stand again, you spot another clue, a broken tie strap half buried under the snow. Its end is frayed proof that it snapped under tension. Maybe a pack horse struggled. Maybe the cold made the leather brittle. You slip the strap into your pocket, more as a reminder that you are not alone out here than for any use it might serve. You step toward a large pine where a faint shape rests against the trunk. As you approach, you recognize it, a small wooden box, its lid askew. Snow fills its corners. You kneel and lift it, tilting out the powder. Inside lie a few items, a bent spoon, a sewing needle stuck in a scrap of hide, and a short length of waxed thread. Such items often served as emergency repair kits on the trail. Although simple, they were precious. A torn coat or snapped saddle strap could mean misery or danger in winter. You pick up the needle and feel its cold bite through your gloves. Someone dropped this in haste, maybe fleeing the storm, maybe searching for shelter. You tuck the needle carefully into your coat lining and close the box. As you rise again, your instincts tug you toward the right, where the trees thin and the land dips just slightly. The child shifts sleepily in your arms as you begin down the incline. Snow softens the sound of your footsteps. Your breaths fall in slow, steady streams of white that fade into the cold. Midway down the slope, you stop sharply. A faint metallic glimmer lies half buried in the snow. You crouch and uncover a small brass button, its surface engraved with a simple flower design. Buttons like this were common on women's riding jackets and children's coats. You hold it in your palm, feeling its weight. Someone passed through here, likely the same group whose threads and straps you found earlier. The wind stirs softly, brushing a few strands of hair across your face. You tuck them behind your ear and continue downward. A sudden vibration of cold air grazes the back of your neck, a shift in the weather. Not a storm, but something else. You slow again. Then you hear it, the faint rhythmic tapping of someone sewing echoing in your memory. You blink, dismissing the phantom sound. Your mind is playing tricks, stirred by fatigue and the items you found. Still, you take comfort in these pieces. They form a trail of sorts. Not footprints, but small signatures of human presence. Enough to assure you that you're not wandering blindly. You follow the dip in the land until you reach a small stream frozen in place. The ice glimmers a muted blue beneath the snow. Beside it lies a torn strip of buckskin tied around a branch. Travellers sometimes use such strips as temporary markers when passing through uncertain weather. Whether this particular strip was meant as a guide or merely discarded is difficult to say, but its presence strengthens your resolve. You kneel and inspect the buckskin. Its surface bears a faint smear of pine pitch, suggesting someone used it as a makeshift repair band before tying it here. You inhale lightly. The pitch scent stings your nose sharp and resinous. The child wakes just long enough to bury their face in your scarf before slipping back into half-sleep. People who study trail remnants often disagree about how best to interpret objects left behind. Some believe they mark intention a purposeful trail. Others argue that winter storms often scattered belongings randomly, their story more chaotic than meaningful. Standing beside the frozen stream now with the child nestled against you and these scattered clues in your pocket, you feel the truth lies somewhere between. These items are not deliberate instructions, but they are not without significance. You follow the stream instead of the trail watercourses often cut through confusing terrain more predictably. As you walk, the child's breath warms your collar again. Their small weight steadies you, reminding you of the urgency in each step. The trees thin once more, and ahead you see a patch of ground that looks packed and uneven, as if several people stood here recently. You kneel and brush the snow aside. Beneath lies a faint rise of disturbed earth, and a single thread from a blanket caught in a bramble. You feel your pulse quicken. You're getting closer. You stand again, the gathered bits of canvas, thread, leather and brass in your pocket resonating like quiet signals. The forest seems to guide you forward, its shadows parting just enough to reveal the next few steps. And so you keep moving, careful and deliberate, carrying the child toward whoever left these scattered traces of presence in the snow. You press forward, the scattered clues still warm in your pocket, despite the cold that gnaws at the edges of your coat. The forest opens into a wide, sloping meadow covered in smooth drifts of untouched snow. The hush is gentler here, as though the storm has tired of its own fury. You pause at the meadow's edge, holding the child closer. Their small breath pools against your collar, a fragile reminder of the responsibility in your arms. You take a step into the open, feeling the snow compress beneath your boots. The meadow stretches long and pale, punctuated only by a few clusters of brittle shrubs. The silence feels too empty at first, almost unsettling. But then out of that quiet you sense something softer rising inside your chest, a warmth that does not belong to the weather. You cannot name it immediately, but the feeling grows as you walk. Halfway across the meadow you spot it, a faint indentation running in a meandering line through the snow, not fresh enough to be clear footsteps, but not old enough to be erased entirely. As you kneel to examine it, the pattern becomes clearer. A bundled shape pressed into the snow repeatedly. A human kneeling or sitting. The mark widens at several points, suggesting someone stopped, often perhaps to rest, or perhaps to wait. You brush the snow aside gently. Whoever sat here did not sit alone. There is a second indentation, smaller, lighter. Another child, maybe, or someone small enough to leave such a delicate impression. You rest your hand lightly over the mark, imagining two figures sharing this very spot, trying to stay warm against the cold. Your thoughts drift to the people of the overland trails who wrote about sudden acts of compassion that blossomed in winter storms. Some journals recount stories of travellers who shared their furs with strangers they met only hours earlier. Others describe families pooling scarce supplies to protect orphaned children found along the path. These gestures were rarely recorded with flourish. They were mentioned in passing, almost modestly, as though kindness was as ordinary as snow itself. A breeze glides across the meadow, carrying a faint warmth. Not physical warmth, but something gentler, emotional, lingering in the air. You close your eyes briefly and let it settle against your shoulders. You picture the people who once knelt here, perhaps exhausted, perhaps frightened, but refusing to abandon each other. You lift your gaze again and notice a shape ahead where the meadow begins to slope upward. A pile of branches arranged carefully at the base of a tree. Not random, intentional. You hurry toward it, boots sinking deeply. When you reach the tree, you see the arrangement is deliberate branches woven roughly into a semicircle, forming a crude windbreak. Such simple structures appear often in old survival accounts. A few families favoured them whenever storms struck, unexpectedly a nest-like barrier to blunt the worst gusts when larger shelters were too far away. You brush snow from the structure's edge and feel a faint residue of warmth, trapped beneath the branches preserved briefly by the storm's stillness. As you examine the spot, you notice something unexpected tucked beneath the woven limbs, a small carved figurine no larger than your thumb. Its shape is rough but unmistakable, a bird with spread wings. The carving is simple, hurried, perhaps even crude, but the effort behind it lingers. Someone made this quickly, maybe to comfort a child, maybe to leave a sign for those following. You lift it gently and hold it to the light. Snowflakes melt on its surface, revealing tiny grooves where a knife tip once pressed. Such small carvings appear rarely in historical record, but when they do, they are mentioned with affection. Some travellers carried little tokens carved by loved ones to keep them company during long journeys. Others made them along the way, shaped out of spare minutes during harsh nights. Whether these objects served as toys, talismans, or simple reminders of human presence, their meanings varied widely. You slide the figurine into your coat pocket alongside the stray button and the scrap of canvas. It feels warm there, or perhaps your mind simply wants it to. The child stirs, waking slightly. Their eyes flutter open, and you lift the figurine for them to see. Their small fingers brush the carved bird, and a faint smile touches their lips before they drift back to sleep. The sight softens something in you. You adjust your grip and turn toward the slope. The woven branches point upward as if intended to guide whoever found them. You follow that direction quietly, climbing through the tree line. Up the slope, the snow deepens again, but faint signs of recent passage linger: a broken twig, a brushed-aside drift, even a shallow slide mark where someone may have sat and steadied themselves with their hands. You follow the trail with growing certainty. As you walk, you think of how historians examining old routes sometimes disagree about these quiet gestures of kindness. Some believe such acts were rare exceptions exaggerated in retellings. Others point to the uncounted stories lost in the cold, arguing that compassion may have been far more common than records reveal. You feel the truth hovering somewhere in the open space between those opinions. The slope levels at last, revealing another small clearing. And there, nestled beneath a wide spruce, lies a shape made of bundled blankets and snow shelter ingenuity. You feel your breath catch. Someone built a small cocoon of sticks and cloth, here layered tightly with fresh disturbances in the snow around it. No footprints leading away yet. Whoever made this shelter may still be close. The warmth of human effort, of shared survival, lingers in the air like a gentle flame. You take a slow breath, your heart lifting, and step forward, certain now that you're walking into the presence of someone who has not given up hope. You approach the little shelter beneath the spruce with measured steps, careful not to disturb the snow that clings to its woven sides. The structure is compact, thoughtfully made from branches, strips of fabric, and a thin layer of pine needles pressed together as insulation. The child in your arms stirs faintly, perhaps sensing you found something important. You crouch slowly beside the shelter, shifting your weight so the child stays warm against your chest. A narrow gap in the side reveals darkness within. You lean closer, listening. No movement. Only the steady hush of snowfall settling onto the branches overhead. You lift one corner of the blanket covering the entrance just enough to look inside. The small hollow is empty, but the bedding is still shaped from a body's recent presence. Whoever rested here must have left not long ago. You inhale the cold air tinged with a faint scent of damp canvas. That trace alone tells a story. Travellers who built such shelters often did so when storms caught them between river crossings or when wagons lagged behind. These makeshift cocoons were used for temporary warmth, especially when the cold threatened to freeze boots or stiffen joints. You touch the pine lining with your gloved fingers. It feels recently disturbed, and a few needles stick to your palm. Someone left this place with haste, but not panic. When you stand again, you notice the faintest suggestion of a path leading away, an uneven series of depressions in the snow, not clean footprints, but softened shapes that hint at careful steps. The trail angles downslope toward a darker band in the distance. You narrow your eyes. That shadowy line could be a riverbank or a frozen creek bed. You follow the faint depressions through the trees. The child keeps close to you, their head nestled under your scarf. As you walk, a sudden drop in the landscape emerges ahead, a sloping embankment leading to the edge of a wide frozen river. The surface glistens with a pale shimmer where thin daylight reflects through drifting snow. You pause at the river's edge, feeling the cold radiate upward through your soles. Ice crossing. The thought alone tightens your jaw. Stories from winter travellers often reference the perils of frozen rivers. The ice could support a loaded wagon one moment and crack open under a single person the next. It depended on unseen currents, shifting temperatures, even the thickness of snow on top. A ridge of rough ice near the opposite bank suggests someone recently climbed out there, scraping the surface with boots or hands. You kneel and brush snow from the river's edge, exposing the first inch of ice. It's clouded with faint lines where the cold has contracted its surface. You tap it lightly. The sound is firm, muted, not hollow. Beneath your touch, the ice feels cold enough to sting through your glove, but also thick enough to tempt you forward. Nearby, something catches your attention, a small cluster of broken cattail stalks sticking up along the bank. Between them lies a length of cord, thin knotted, stiffened by frost. It appears to have been used as a handline, perhaps tied to someone's belt during a crossing. Frontier practices often involved attaching lengths of rope or leather strips during risky ice passages, allowing a traveller to be pulled out if they misjudge the ice. You lift the cord, feeling how the knots were tied quickly, maybe even with trembling hands. You straighten, studying the frozen river. Its surface is uneven, with patches of powdery snow and harder polished ice that glints faintly. You hold your breath and listen. No groaning, no shifting. Only the gentle sound of flakes landing. You weigh your options. Crossing with the child complicates everything. You take one step onto the ice, testing it lightly with your heel. The surface holds. You press more weight. Still firm, yet the risk remains. Beneath the surface, water moves unseen. Experts who study river ice conditions disagree about how 19th century travellers evaluated crossings. Some believe people had a keen sense for reading the colour and sound of ice, trained by necessity. Others suggest that many crossings were little more than hopeful gambles. Standing here now, you understand both views. No amount of knowledge erases the uncertainty. You retreat a step and check the shoreline again. A series of impressions leads farther upstream. The traveller who built the shelter must have moved along the riverbank before attempting a crossing. You follow these faint marks, feeling the child's weight shift gently with each step. Along the river's edge, the ice thickens into a more opaque sheet. You crouch and tap it again. This time the sound is deeper, more reassuring. You feel the vibration travel through your boot when you test it. The child stirs, murmuring softly. You whisper that everything will be all right. You take a deep breath and step onto the ice again, lowering your weight deliberately. The surface does not flex. You move forward slowly, your boots gliding across powder-covered patches. Each step feels heavier than the last, but the ice holds your weight. Halfway across, the wind shifts abruptly, sending a trail of flakes sweeping across the ice in a thin ribbon. The sound is strangely musical, like sand brushing along stone. You pause, allowing the gust to pass. A chill runs down your spine that is not from the weather. The silence after the wind feels almost expectant. The opposite bank draws closer. Just a few more steps. You move more quickly now, sensing the shallower water beneath this section. When your boot touches the snow-covered shore, relief washes through you in warm waves. The child sighs softly, sensing your calm. You step fully onto the bank and turn to glance at the ice behind you. Your footprints trail across the river in a gentle curve, already beginning to soften under falling snow. Ahead, the faint trail continues, another series of impressions leading into the trees. Whoever made them crossed this river before the storm thickened. Their path remains faint, but present, guiding you onward. You wrap the child tighter in your coat, touch the bird carving in your pocket for reassurance, and step forward, grateful for the silent strength of the ice that carried you through. You follow the faint depressions into a stand of tall spruces where the snow lies deeper than your knees. The branches above hold thick, drooping blankets of white, and every few steps you duck instinctively as clumps fall with soft, muffled thuds. The air changes here. It feels dense, almost weight-bearing, and the light becomes so dim that it barely grazes the surface of the snow. You shift the child in your arms, feeling their tiny fingers curl into your coat. You whisper gently to them, though the words vanish into the stillness. Only a little farther in you notice something strange, a mound of snow that does not look like a natural drift. The shape is too rounded, too smooth, as if pressed from above. You approach slowly, your legs sinking into the deep snow with each step. When you reach the mound, you crouch and sweep your hand across its surface. The snow collapses inward, revealing a hollow space beneath. A small shelter. Not like the woven one beneath the spruce earlier, but a compact cavity shaped by hand or by careful motion. You widen the opening, gently brushing snow aside until the interior becomes visible. Someone used pine boughs as a lining, pressing them against the hollow's walls to keep the snow from dripping onto sleepers. The boughs still release that distinct resin scent when crushed, even now buried under frost. You slide your hand deeper into the shelter and feel lingering warmth. Not heat, but the faint memory of it. The child lifts their head slightly, sensing the change. You glance around the clearing, noticing how unusually smooth the snow around the shelter appears, as if the storm pressed it flat overnight. A snowfall like that can hide a person entirely, even when they are only inches from the surface. People who travelled these mountains often wrote about mornings when snow drifted so heavily that whole camps disappeared beneath a white crust. Some described waking beneath layers of snow that muffled every sound, creating a sensation of floating. Others recounted the shock of finding companions nearly entombed after a night storm, needing to claw their way out with numb hands. You imagine someone lying in this hollow as the blizzard piled quietly above them. You dig farther with your glove and uncover a small fur mitten, tiny, soft and edged with stitch thread that is fraying now. You lift it into the faint light. A child's mitten. You glance at the little one in your arms and then back at the shelter. Perhaps another child rested here. Or perhaps this mitten belonged to the one you carry. Either way, it tells you that whoever passed through this place travelled under immense strain, trying to protect the smallest among them. You place the mitten inside your coat for safekeeping. As you stand again, you feel a faint tremor beneath your boots. Not an earthquake or distant rumble, but the subtle settling of snow. It reminds you how fragile these hollows can be. Snow shelters are clever and surprisingly effective, but they require constant attention to prevent collapse. Some winter accounts mention how people learned to pat the ceiling from the inside to maintain its shape, while others spoke of hearing a soft cracking that sent them scrambling out into the cold seconds before the roof gave way. You brush the top of the mound lightly. It holds for now, but only just. A cold wind slips between the trees, scattering loose powder into thin spirals. The child nestles against your collar, seeking warmth. You tighten your hold on them, then scan the forest for any sign of the group you're trying to reach. There, near a cluster of firs, you notice a faint indentation in the snow that curves upward into the trees. The trail continues, though barely. Before you leave the hollow completely, you crouch once more and press your ear close to the snow, listening. A faint, soft echo emerges, not a voice, but something like the memory of movement. Snow settling over old space. You rise again, exhaling slowly. Some researchers studying old winter shelters argue over how often travellers carved out these pockets beneath drifts. A few claim that families relied on them regularly during unexpectedly harsh nights, while others suggest such shelters were rare, used only in dire circumstances. Kneeling beside this hollow, seeing the mitten and the pine lining, feeling the lingering warmth beneath the crust, you cannot imagine this was anything but necessity. You turn toward the faint trail and begin walking again. The snow deepens, but your legs find a steady rhythm. Ahead, the trees seem to open slightly, revealing the faintest suggestion of rising ground. Perhaps a ridge, perhaps a path that leads towards safety. You keep the child close, feeling their slow breath against your scarf. You adjust your coat, tighten the straps of your pack, and take another careful step. The wind lifts softly around you, carrying a whisper of movement from somewhere ahead in the forest. A subtle shift, a suggestion of life. Someone is nearby. You follow the sound, slowly, purposefully guided not just by tracks in the snow, but by a fragile thread of connection woven through the cold, leading you forward toward whatever waits beyond the next curtain of trees. You press onward through the trees, following the faint rise in the land until the forest begins to thin again. The snow softens under your boots, giving way with a quiet sigh each time you shift your weight. The child sleeps against your chest, their small breath ghosting rhythmically along the linen of your scarf. You feel your own breathing settle in response, a slow exchange of warmth between the two of you. For a moment, the storm's harsh edges seem to blur. Then the wind returns not fierce, but steady like a long exhale moving across the valley. The sound carries a distant rumble, not loud enough to alarm, but deep enough to make you pause. You lift your head, sensing that the storm has begun to gather its remaining strength. If the mountain intends a final push, it may come soon. You tread carefully toward a natural corridor formed by two gradual ridges. The ground here is smoother, freer of deep drifts. As you walk, a new sound reaches you, a long, dragging hiss, like snow sliding against itself far up the slope. Not an avalanche, nothing sharp or sudden, but unmistakably the voice of the storm shifting again. Travellers who journeyed through these mountains in the cold months often described how storms behaved in stages. First came the quick bursts full of wind and sharp flurries, then the heavy blankets of snow that fell slowly, quietly, hiding everything beneath them. And finally a lingering wave, neither violent nor calm, but persistent in its effort to wear down anyone still on the trail. You feel yourself entering that last stage now, the storm's endurance test. Your boots crunch along a shallow ridge and you notice something unusual beneath a thin layer of snow, a piece of wood smoothed on one side, splintered on the other. You pick it up. It looks like the broken end of a walking stick, or perhaps the handle of a small sled. The break is fresh, the wood pale and raw where it snapped. Someone passed here recently enough that the cold has not yet darkened the exposed grain. You brush snow from the wood and tuck it into your pack. An odd detail from an old journal stirs in your memory. A traveller once wrote that when storms reach their final stage, objects left behind seem to reappear in the landscape, shaken loose by shifting drifts. It was as though the storm was returning forgotten things. Whether this was poetic imagination or simple observation is difficult to know, but the broken stick in your hand makes you wonder. You step forward and the ground dips suddenly beneath your boot. You tighten your grip on the child and steady yourself on a nearby trunk. A shallow trench hides beneath the snow, an old path carved by travellers or animals. You lower yourself into it, grateful for the slight shelter the walls provide from the wind. As you follow the trench, you notice another sign of recent passage, a faint scratch on a stone where a metal edge scraped against it. A buckle, maybe, or the corner of a tin mug. You run your glove along the mark, feeling its sharp groove. Someone was moving through this narrow space before you, navigating the same half-buried route. Not far ahead, the trench begins to rise into a sloping path that curves around a broad outcrop. You climb slowly, your boots slipping once or twice on icy patches. The wind hums a low tune as you ascend, threading between the rocks like a restless spirit. The sound feels closer than before, as if the storm has begun to coil around the ridge. Some modern wilderness researchers interpret such wind behaviour as the mountain's way of funneling weather through specific channels. Others argue that winter travellers simply experienced ordinary gusts as something more meaningful when they were exhausted. You can appreciate both notions. In your tired state, the wind feels almost alive. The ridge narrows near the top, but as you cross it, the view shifts, opening to a broad, dazzling expanse of white. The storm hasn't ended yet, light breaks through in faint ribbons, illuminating the valley below. Through the shifting haze, you see scattered dark forms along the snow shrub stones, the rising shapes of trees farther off, and then something else. Tracks, clearer than any you've seen since morning. A pair of deep impressions spaced evenly, each one followed by a smaller print beside it. An adult walking with a child. Your heart tightens, and then expands with something like cautious joy. You step forward and kneel beside the prints. The snow hasn't softened them fully yet. They cannot be more than a few hours old. You touch one, feeling the slight warmth remaining beneath its crust, a heat, carried by the mere act of stepping. You lift your head and scan the valley. A faint shadow moves between the distant trees, just a flicker. but enough to make your breath catch. You rise quickly, the child in your arms rousing with a soft, confused sound. You whisper reassurance, though your voice trembles. Everything in you wants to run, but you force your steps into a careful rhythm. Your knees feel weak with renewed hope, and your chest tightens in anticipation. As you follow the prints, the wind shifts again. But this time, the sound carries a note of release. The storm isn't over, but it is breaking apart. The air lightens. The sky opens in thin streaks. Snow still falls, but gently like the fading breath of something immense and tired. The tracks lead you toward a stand of firs at the far end of the valley. With each step, the distance shrinks. The child lifts their head again, sensing the change. You whisper softly, almost there. Your boots sink into the prints left by someone who walked this path before you. You step into their steps deliberately, one after another, until the final stretch of the valley opens before you like a quiet invitation. You move toward it, heart-pounding breath rising in small clouds of hope and exhaustion, as the storm loosens its hold and you walk into the last steps of its long white corridor. You follow the prints with growing urgency, though you keep your steps steady so the child remains snug against your chest. The valley ahead narrows gently, funneling you toward a stand of trees so dense they appear woven together. Snow gathers thickly on their branches, but not enough to hide the faint pulse of movement you noticed earlier. You slow as you draw closer, letting the quiet guide your senses. The storm, exhausted from its long performance, seems to hover now in a tired drift, its flakes falling lightly, almost lazily. The tracks deepen near the entrance to the grove. Two sets again, one larger pressed down with the weight of someone carrying supplies perhaps, and another smaller stepping close to the first. You crouch briefly to touch the fresh snow inside, one of the impressions feeling the slight pocket of warmth beneath its surface. Whoever passed through here moved not long ago. The child in your arms shifts awake, their eyes half opening, searching the pale world around you. You whisper softly into their hair, promising nothing but closeness for now. They settle again, small fingers curling into your scarf. You cross beneath the canopy of the grove and the air changes instantly. The wind quiets. The snow falls slower, drifting like down feathers shaken from a blanket. Beneath the trees lies a series of footprints stamped more clearly, circling a spot where the snow is compressed by repeated motion, as though someone paced there for a long time. You recognize this behavior instinctively, the slow, anxious walking of a person waiting, and then you see it. A faint glow, a tiny ember of colour flickering low to the ground, half hidden behind a fallen trunk. You approach carefully. The ember grows brighter as you step closer, reddish warm, unmistakably the last breath of a dying fire. A small circle of stones encases its core, the coals pulsing weakly like a heartbeat spent from worry. You kneel beside it and hold your free hand near the warmth. The heat is faint but real, slipping into your skin like a sigh of relief. Someone tended this fire not long ago, someone who expected to return. Your gaze shifts to a dark shape resting against a nearby log. A bundle of blankets rises slightly and falls again in a slow rhythm. Someone lies there. You stand still, hardly daring to breathe, then step closer and lean gently over the figure. A face emerges from the shadows. A woman, her hair dusted with snow eyes, closed breath forming small clouds. Her arm is half hidden beneath the blankets, curled protectively around a space that now lies empty. You swallow hard. She must have been holding the child before the storm scattered everything. You feel your chest grow tight as understanding sinks in. You kneel and speak softly, barely louder than a whisper. The woman stirs, lashes trembling, then her eyes open just enough to see your silhouette through the dim light. She focuses slowly, first on your face, then on the bundle in your arms. Recognition floods her expression, a fragile mixture of disbelief, relief, and exhaustion. Her hand rises shakily toward the child as though she fears they might vanish if she reaches too quickly. You lower yourself and place the child gently into her waiting arms. The little one wakes at the movement, blinking in confusion before letting out a soft, relieved sound and burrowing against her chest. The mother holds them so tightly that her hands tremble with the effort. Snow falls silently onto her shoulders as she bends her face against the child's hair, breathing them in as though she needs the proof of their presence to believe it fully. You sit beside them quietly, your heartbeat finally slowing. The dying fire casts a faint glow over the scene. In the fragile stillness, you feel something warm break through the cold, an unspoken gratitude maybe, or the shared understanding of what it means to survive a night like this with hope still intact. The woman lifts her gaze to you. Her voice is faint when she speaks, brittle from cold and fear but filled with emotion. She tries to thank you, though the words crumble on her tongue. You simply shake your head. No words needed. The forest has carried many stories of hardship, but moments like this, reunions carved from snow and endurance, rarely made it into the old journals, even though they were surely just as real. You help her pull the blankets tighter around her, and the child reinforcing the barrier against the lingering cold. As you do, you notice the faint remnants of a small protective charm pinned to the blanket, a braided loop of thread patched and faded. Items like that rarely appear in formal histories, but scattered accounts mention them tiny symbols meant to guard families during difficult journeys. Whether they held any power or not, they meant something personal, something hopeful. The woman leans wearily against the log, her child dozing against her chest. You sit beside them, adding a piece of fallen branch to the ember circle. The glow brightens slightly, lifting a bit of warmth into the air. Above you, the storm finally begins to unravel, thinning into scattered flakes drifting in unpredictable, unhurried swirls. Night settles around the grove in muted silver. The tension you carried for so long loosens with each breath. You lean against the fallen trunk, exhaustion, wrapping slow cords around your limbs. But for once, fatigue feels like rest instead of danger. Snow gathers gently on the branches overhead. The wind softens into a calm, even hush. You watch the mother and child nestle together, their breath sinking in soft, rhythmic waves. A fragile tranquility spreads through the grove, the kind that feels earned, not given. You close your eyes for a moment, not to sleep fully, but to let the world soften around you. The sound of the woman's quiet murmuring blends with the fading crackle of the fire. The storm recedes into memory, leaving only the whisper of the trees swaying lightly above you. And as your breathing steadies, the night folds gently around all three of you, carrying you into a calmer, quieter place, where the worst has already passed. The storm drifts farther into the distance, now melting into the pale sweep of night, as if the mountains have decided you deserve a long breath at last. The air softens, settling into a gentler rhythm that hums through the trees overhead. You feel your shoulders grow heavy, but not with fear anymore, just the slow unravelling weight of a long journey coming to its quiet end. The fire beside you fades into a soft glow, each ember dimming in a warm pulse before resting. It casts a delicate light across the snow, turning the ground into a shimmering canvas of silver and faint gold. You watch it flicker, that small heartbeat of warmth in the cold, and let it soothe something deep inside you. The mother and child breathe in unison, now wrapped together like two small constellations sharing a single orbit. Their presence steadies the air around you, filling the grove with a quiet sense of completion. You listen to their breaths, slow, and even blending into the muted whisper of snow brushing across the branches. Your own eyelids grow heavier, the kind of heaviness that settles calmly, gently, without urgency. The cold no longer bites. It simply surrounds you, quiet and distant, as though the world has wrapped itself in a soft blanket of stillness. You lean your head back against the log, letting your muscles loosen. The night deepens, but it no longer feels threatening. The darkness feels softened like cloth warmed by a fire long extinguished. It welcomes you, holds you. You inhale once more slowly, then exhale, letting the breath drift into the quiet air around you. The storm is over. The forest is calm. You are safe. Sweet dreams.